Chapter 1. In the royal palace of Grand Xia, the resplendent palaces shone brightly under the blazing sun. The white marble steps led to the heavens, and the extravagant palace buildings were built one after another, so luxurious that it was impossible to count them all. The Xia dynasty had reached the pinnacle of a dynasty. However, in the eyes of those who were observant, this was an omen of the collapse of the great edifice. Great Xia was too strong. These 1,000 years were Great Xia's 1,000 years. They were invincible in the divine prefecture. In the vast land of the divine prefecture, there were more than 100 dynasties, but Great Xia was the only one that stood for 1,000 years. It was an irreversible rule that extreme prosperity leads to decline. The invincible Great Xia could not stay invincible forever. In the past 100 years, there were signs of decline. There were no wise emperors, and there were no virtuous officials. In addition, the Mongol court in the north was getting stronger day by day, and the Eternal Night sect, which had been silent for 1,000 years, had reappeared. The future of Great Xia was not as bright as it seemed today. The emperor of Great Xia was not very open-minded. Compared to the emperors who had expanded the territory of Great Xia in the past, he was much worse. Fortunately, the foundation of Great Xia was strong enough, and the current emperor was not completely useless. Although he did not make great contributions, he did not make any major mistakes. The cavalry of the Mongol court in the north had crossed the border of Beijiang Plain several times, ignoring the dignity of Great Xia. The debate between those who wanted war and those who wanted peace became more and more intense. The emperor of Great Xia was getting older, and his mind was becoming more and more indecisive. His attitude towards the Mongol court had always been ambiguous, neither war nor peace. However, compared to the Mongol court in the north, the revival of the Eternal Night sect was more of a headache for the emperor of Great Xia. The Eternal Night sect had a long history that could not be traced. It was a power that the dynasties of the Central Plains feared. When the ancestors of Great Xia were in their prime, they suppressed the Eternal Night sect and almost destroyed it. However, after 1,000 years of silence and recovery, the return of the Eternal Night sect was an unavoidable disaster. The strength of the Eternal Night cult lay not only in the terrifying faith that they had accumulated over thousands of years, but also in the support of unfathomably powerful martial arts. Back in the day, the Great Xia dynasty had been so powerful that the divine prefecture had banned martial arts, and the entire world had submitted to it. However, the Eternal Night cult had still not been destroyed. They had temporarily hidden themselves in the darkness, all for the sake of reappearing in the world today. Under the night sky, the heavenly mandate palace was still as bright as day. The three ministers were silent, and the ministers were prostrating. On the dragon throne in the heavenly mandate palace, the emperor of the Great Xia dynasty frowned a few times, and his expression was unusually ugly. "Your Majesty, we can't wait any longer. The voices of the soldiers in the north are getting louder and louder. If the imperial court doesn't say anything and continues to endure, I'm afraid it will chill the hearts of these soldiers who have sacrificed their lives for the country. We can't. Once the war breaks out, it will get out of hand and cause the commoners to lose their homes. Moreover, the Eternal Night cult has already appeared. If we take advantage of this opportunity to launch an attack, our dynasty will be attacked from both sides. Tolerating the evil will only make the Gu Meng royal court go even more overboard. The sons of the Celestial Empire are brave and skilled in battle. How can we allow others to bully us just because of some Eternal Night cult?" The debate in the hall was abnormally intense. None of them were willing to take a step back. Only the three dukes remained silent, not saying a word. The three dukes rarely discussed politics since the founding of the Great Xia dynasty. It wasn't that they couldn't, but that they didn't want to. As long as it wasn't a last resort, the three dukes wouldn't speak. This was a consensus. Therefore, no matter how intense the debate in the hall was, no one would ask the three dukes to make a decision. Hesitation flashed in the eyes of the emperor of the Great Xia dynasty on the dragon throne. It was not easy to decide whether to send troops or not. Whoosh! Suddenly, a sharp silver light shot through the hall and directly toward the emperor of the Great Xia dynasty on the dragon throne. The arrow that came out of nowhere dazzled everyone's eyes, and they didn't even have time to react. The stunning arrow came silently and without warning. The heavenly mandate palace, the emperor, and the ministers were all taken away by the sharpness of the arrow. However, this unstoppable arrow was caught by a withered hand. Behind the emperor of the Great Xia dynasty, the old eunuch who had been silent all this time walked to the front of the dragon throne. He covered the sky with one hand and blocked all the wind and rain in front of the emperor. "Assassin, catch the assassin!" At this moment, everyone in the hall finally reacted. Their expressions changed drastically, and they shouted sternly. The head of the ministers, the three dukes who had been silent all this time, also stood up and looked coldly in the direction where the arrow came from. It was really a huge responsibility. This was the first time in thousands of years that someone had entered the palace to assassinate, and it was right in front of them. On the dragon throne, the emperor of the Great Xia dynasty stood up angrily. His expression was livid, and he spat out two words fiercely: "Investigate." Yes. The emperor was furious, and the ministers below were in awe. Their minds were in a whirl. The timing of this assassination was too subtle, and it really came at the wrong time. In the next moment, orders were sent out. The palace was forbidden to enter, and the palace gates were tightly shut. The entire palace was surrounded by tens of thousands of imperial guards. There was a sentry every 5 steps, and there was a sentry every 10 steps. The tight security made it difficult for even a fly to fly out, let alone a living person. What happened? In the palace, Ning Chen looked out of the window at groups of imperial guards passing by. He was very puzzled, but when he thought of the fate that would follow, he lost interest. Not far away, several youths who were about the same age as Ning Chen were also in low spirits. They were all children from poor families and had no choice but to take this step. "Sai, what should I do?" Ning Chen rested his chin on his right hand and pondered quietly. He would rather die than become a eunuch. Although it was said that he should take things as they came, from a strong and outstanding young man to a disabled but strong-willed eunuch, the difference was too big. Worry, Ning Chen sighed softly. He wanted to escape, but when he saw the groups of imperial guards passing by from time to time, he immediately dispelled the idea of seeking death. He did not want to be chopped into meat paste. It was said that in this era, there were death by 1,000 cuts, dismemberment by 5 horses, skinning and pulling out tendons, burying alive, and carting. Sigh, he did not want to think about it anymore. Once I enter the palace, it is as deep as the sea. From then on, I will be surrounded by passers-by. The soft sigh attracted many disdainful gazes. Ning Chen raised his head and smiled shyly. He had almost forgotten that everyone was in a bad mood. The clanging of armor on the imperial guards became louder and louder, indicating that more imperial guards were being mobilized from the palace. The assassination of the emperor was a big deal. Orders came from the heavenly mandate palace one after another. The 3 dukes and all the officials were waiting for a result. Seeing the youths in front of him being castrated and carried away one by one, Ning Chen was so anxious that he felt like a cat was scratching his heart. But there were so many imperial guards outside. Compared to his thin arms and legs, he did not dare to fight. "God, you should just strike me to death." Finally, the last youth was carried away by 2 eunuchs. Ning Chen looked out the window and shouted in his heart. Boom! Suddenly, the dark night sky above the imperial palace suddenly lit up. A dazzling bolt of lightning streaked across the 9 heavens, followed by the rumbling of thunder. The sudden earth-shattering sound startled everyone. Ning Chen was also shocked by the sound of thunder. God, I was just saying. Don't take it seriously. Boom! There was another loud rumble of thunder, followed by a torrential downpour. The torches used by the imperial guards to light the room were immediately extinguished by the rain. In this short moment, a black shadow flashed into the room from a corner not far away. The light of a sword flashed. The old eunuch who was cleaning the knife in his hand was immediately stunned and fell to the ground. Only Ning Chen, who had been bored and in a daze, was left in the large cleaning room. The black-clothed assassin wanted to kill him, but he was injured by a hidden master in the Imperial Guards when he was escaping. In a situation where his skills were limited, he could only kill the eunuch closest to him. As for Ning Chen, if he wanted to shout, he would not be able to stop him immediately. "I can get you out of here," Ning Chen blurted out as they stared at each other. The sudden words stunned the black-clothed assassin. Seeing that the assassin was in a daze, Ning Chen hurriedly continued, "In order not to die, there are Imperial Guards outside, so it's impossible for you to escape. Furthermore, the Imperial Guards will soon find this place, so it's impossible for you to hide. Either way, you will die." After saying all this in one breath, Ning Chen almost choked himself to death. He quickly took a deep breath and said, "You have no choice. You can only trust me." "Who are you?" The assassin opened his mouth. His voice was cold and without a trace of emotion. "A woman." Ning Chen was stunned and subconsciously said, "I am a eunuch." "Hey, what a crow's mouth." After saying that, Ning Chen's eyes unconsciously looked at the woman's chest. As expected, it was flat. Did she bind her chest? It was too flat, right? Shwa! The light of a sword flashed. It was so close that Ning Chen quickly retracted his gaze. He despised himself in his heart. What kind of time was it? He still had the mind to think about this. Calm down, calm down. But before that, you have to do me a small favor." After temporarily calming down the woman, Ning Chen let out a sigh of relief. He immediately walked forward and took off the clothes of the dead eunuch on the ground. "Quickly change, or it will be too late." While speaking, Ning Chen smeared the blood from the old eunuch's neck onto half of his pants. Especially the important part between his legs, it was soaked with blood. It looked very scary. After doing all this, Ning Chen blew out most of the lights in the room. The whole room immediately became dark. Although it was still possible to see, it was already difficult. Not far away, the woman had already changed into the old eunuch's clothes. She glanced at Ning Chen's actions and did not say anything. She could see that this brat was quite clever. Perhaps he could really help her escape this disaster. She was not afraid of death, but if there was a chance to live, no one would be willing to die. Ning Chen turned around and saw the woman's face. It was so bright that it made people's eyes unwilling to leave it. She was in the prime of her life, very charming, very feminine, however, at this time, looking like this gave people a headache. Ning Chen thought for a moment, then wiped his hands on the blood on his body and rubbed them on the ground. Then, he walked up to the woman and smiled brightly. Then, he wiped his hands that were covered in blood and dust on the woman's face. Of course, Ning Chen greeted her with a warning look. There was a bit of pride, and still a bit of pride. The woman did not say anything. She coldly endured the change in her beautiful face. It was too horrible to look at. Chapter 2. A moment later, Ning Chen looked at his masterpiece and smiled foolishly. He was indeed a genius. Under the dim light, the beautiful woman in front of him disappeared and was replaced by an unkempt eunuch. The woman did not know how to appreciate his beauty and was expressionless. Ning Chen stood there for a moment, but the woman did not praise him. He felt a little angry. Forget it, he was a man. He did not want to be calculative with a woman. Ning Chen dragged the old eunuch to the bottom of the bed before lying down on the bed himself. Then, he stared at the woman and instructed worriedly, "When the Imperial Guards come later, you must slash them down. Make sure you hit them accurately." The woman understood tacitly and nodded lightly. She took the knife that was used to clean himself and then quietly walked to Ning Chen's side. She calmly took off his pants. "What's going on?" Why didn't you light the lamp? Not long after, a few Imperial Army soldiers walked in. The one in the lead was wearing a bright green armor. He looked around the room and asked sternly. Schwa. Before he finished his words, the woman's knife fell. Blood splattered all over the woman's face. The bright red blood flowed down the woman's cheeks, making her dirty face look even more blurred. The wind blew out the candle. It's fine. I've done this many times. It's fine even without the lamp. The woman said in a hoarse voice. The shining saber in her hand was dyed red. The dim light and the strange atmosphere made the Imperial guards at the door feel a chill down their spines. Looking at the blood on the young man's pants, the Imperial Army soldiers felt a chill in their hearts. The cleansing room was a dirty and unlucky place. If not for the order, no one would be willing to come here. Let's go and check the other places. Seeing that there was nothing wrong, the leader waved his hand and led the Imperial Army soldiers away from this troublesome place. Ning Chen, who could not hold on any longer, suddenly sat up. He sucked in cold air from the pain and gritted his teeth. Woman, you did it on purpose. The knife just now was half an inch away from saying goodbye to the man. Furthermore, it was so deep. Even if he did not become a eunuch, he would have bled to death. Yes. The woman nodded her head honestly. Ning Chen was so angry that he almost fainted. How could she bully him like this? What should we do next? The woman asked. She knew that this was only the beginning. The Imperial Palace would definitely be under martial law for a long time. If she couldn't escape, she would be discovered sooner or later. That's right, I haven't asked you yet. What did you do? Why are there so many people trying to capture you? Ning Chen was very curious. The moment he woke up, he saw the majestic sight of the Imperial Guards going berserk. The heavens were really taking care of him. The assassination attempt on the Xia Emperor failed. The woman was very calm, and Ning Chen was also very calm. A moment later, he exclaimed, "What?" Seeing the woman's sharp gaze, Ning Chen smiled embarrassedly. I've lost my composure, his body unconsciously leaned back. This woman is a ruthless person. Don't go crazy and kill me or something. You still haven't answered. What's next? The woman asked again. Wait. This time, Ning Chen was very obedient and quickly told him the plan. Soon, there will be eunuchs coming to carry him. This place has just been checked. There shouldn't be any more Imperial guards coming tonight. You stay here first. Remember, don't try to escape. The woman stared at Ning Chen for a long time before lightly nodding, indicating that she would listen to his advice. Sure enough, not long after, 2 eunuchs came and carried Ning Chen away without a word. The woman quietly watched Ning Chen leave. Her pair of bright eyes looked so beautiful under the light. Even the bloodstains on her face could not hide it. Not long after, in a spacious room, the 2 eunuchs carried Ning Chen to a bed. On the rows of beds next to it, there were all new people who had just been castrated. Some of them had fainted and were still unconscious. Some of them were secretly crying. It was unknown whether it was because of pain or something else. The medicine to stop bleeding and treat injuries was at the bedside. Everyone had it. This was only a temporary residence. Tomorrow, there would be people who would arrange for them to return to their homes. If they were lucky, they would be by the side of the imperial concubines or princes and have a good future. If they were unlucky, they could only be arranged to do some chores in the laundry workshop. After being temporarily safe, Ning Chen calmed down and thought about what to do in the future. He could not stay in this palace forever. There were many people and eyes here. If he was not careful, someone would discover that he was a fake eunuch. At that time, he would definitely be chopped into pieces by that old man, the emperor. That woman's methods were as troublesome as her face. She was a ruthless person who even dared to assassinate the emperor. He really could not afford to offend her. Right now, the first thing he had to consider was how to send this great aunt away. Otherwise, if she was in a bad mood one day, she would really kill him. He would have no place to cry even if he wanted to. Not sure if it was because he had lost too much blood from that woman's attack or because he was really too tired, Ning Chen thoughtlessly fell asleep as he thought about it. Only the sound of his low sobbing accompanied the sound of the rain falling outside the room. It did not stop for the entire night. Happy times were always very short. Just as Ning Chen was sleeping soundly, the sky unknowingly brightened up. The early morning sun was not beautiful because it meant that his life as a eunuch had officially begun. After the rainy night, the sky was very clear. Ning Chen limped out of the house with the help of the wall. He walked 2 laps around the house and breathed in the fresh air outside. He was in a very good mood. Just as he was about to express the beautiful admiration in his heart, he was blocked in the chest by a croaky voice. It was as uncomfortable as eating a fly. Which family's little brat is this? Don't block this eunuch's path. He was wearing a sapphire blue robe embroidered with a red-crowned crane. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand and wore a peacock feather hat inlaid with jewels. His skin was excessively white and coupled with his face that was neither yin nor yang, he looked exactly like a deformed Dongfang booby. Ning Chen forcefully suppressed the feeling in his stomach and took a step back to avoid him. However, he unintentionally pulled on his wound, causing him to grit his teeth in pain. This little one greets eunuch. May eunuch have good fortune and peace. N. Zhao Jin stopped and curiously looked at the youth in front of her. She asked, May eunuch have good fortune and peace? What a strange greeting. Where did you learn it from? I'm finished. Ning Chen immediately knew that he had said something wrong. However, he had just arrived here. Who would know how to greet him? Now that things had come to this, he could only make up some nonsense. May eunuch have good fortune and peace. This little one was shocked by eunuch's aura and forgot to properly say the greeting that my hometown used to express respect to the elders. This little one lost my composure. I hope that eunuch can forgive this little one for being insensible. In the end, Ning Chen felt extremely disgusted. Especially when he didn't know what this old eunuch had smeared on his body. The smell was strange, causing his Ren-Du and Du meridians to churn. He really wanted to slap this old fellow to death. Clever little fellow, you can follow our family in the future. Zhao Jin sized up the former and nodded in satisfaction. This was a good material. If he was properly trained, he should be able to help her a lot. Follow your head. Ning Chen cursed in his heart. However, he still had a smile on his face. Thank you for your praise, eunuch. This little one is new to the palace and has many things that I don't understand. Since eunuch didn't abandon me, this little one is naturally very happy. And, not bad. You can just call me eunuch Xiao in the future. What's your name? Ning Chen. And, from now on, I'll call you little Ning. Zhao Jin nodded in satisfaction. Your uncle. Hearing this, Ning Chen couldn't help but blurt out. This time, he really couldn't hold back. N? What did you say? Zhao Jin frowned slightly. He didn't understand what his uncle meant. However, this brat's tone seemed to carry a trace of dissatisfaction which made him unhappy. No, nothing. Eunuch Xiao bestowing a name makes this little one too happy. Ning Chen's face was full of smiles, as brilliant as a flower blooming. Little Ning, your whole family is little Ning. I have matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving first. Little Ning, there are many rules in the palace. You have to learn them diligently. After speaking, Zhao Jin waved the horsetail whisk in his hand and turned to leave. Phew. Looking at the distant eunuch Xiao, Ning Chen let out a long breath and wiped the sweat on his forehead. In this world, the hardest thing to deal with wasn't women, but people who were neither male nor female. Which family's servant is actually blocking the way? However, just at this moment, a stern rebuke once again rang out by his ear, causing Ning Chen to tremble in fright. "Fuck, you're still here." Ning Chen's anger soared. "I'm standing in this damned place. How am I blocking your way?" He was about to flip out on the spot, but when he saw the imperial canopy embroidered with a phoenix pattern, his anger was immediately extinguished by a bucket of cold water. "Oh my God, who is this?" Surrounded by 4 beautiful palace maids, 2 at the front and 2 at the back, a woman with an incomparably beautiful face walked over. Her hair was tied up in a phoenix bun, and her hair was lightly swept. Her eyes were filled with spring, and her skin was as smooth as jade. She was 70% beautiful and 30% seductive. It was hard for people to shift their gaze away from her. Ning Chen didn't recognize this woman, but even if he hadn't eaten pork, he had seen pigs run. In the palace, people like her could be counted with one's fingers. Moreover, this woman wasn't to be trifled with. He would have to run away sooner or later, so it was better to be low-key. Taking a step back, then another step back, Ning Chen bowed his body and lowered his head. He muttered, "I'm just a passerby. You can't see me." When the little eunuch in the lead saw Ning Chen move aside, he lightly snorted and didn't say anything else. As a servant, he didn't dare to appear too overbearing in front of his master. "Wait a moment." After taking 2 steps, Wang Yunshang suddenly stopped. She glanced at Ning Chen and said, "Why aren't you kneeling?" At this time, the 4 palace maids and the little eunuch finally reacted. From a moment ago until now, this unfamiliar fellow had never knelt. If Wang Yunshang hadn't spoken, they wouldn't have reacted at all. This little one is new to the palace and doesn't know the rules. "Please forgive me, Your Highness." Knowing that he couldn't get away with it, Ning Chen softly sighed and respectfully said, "Now you know." "I know." "Then why aren't you kneeling?" "I'm a newly purified person, so I can't do as I please." Wang Yunshang wasn't willing to let go, and Ning Chen also wasn't willing to kneel. After a moment of deadlock, Wang Yunshang's lips curled up, and her intimidating eyes carefully examined the youth in front of her. "Oh. So it's like that. Then forget it." "Many thanks, Your Highness." Ning Chen let out a sigh of relief. He lowered his head to hide the arrogance in his eyes, and his tone was as respectful as ever. Chapter 3. After Imperial concubine Wan left, Ning Chen raised his head and narrowed his eyes. She was the scariest person he had ever met since he entered the palace. Not only was she a woman of status, but she also had the ability to conceal her emotions. This woman was no ordinary person. There were dangers everywhere in the palace. If one was not careful, they would be drawn into an unknown whirlpool. Ning Chen felt that his future was bleak. Unfortunately, the palace was now under lockdown and it was impossible for him to escape. "I wonder how that woman is doing. Did she listen to me and not run around?" Bored, Ning Chen continued to walk around with his hands on the wall. On the way, he met 1 or 2 youths who were as bored as he was. He grinned and greeted them cordially. Reality proved that the medicine from the palace was not ordinary. It was much more effective than the dog-skin plasters from the future. Ning Chen was still worried. The woman seemed to be injured and could not show her face. Even if she hid in the cleansing room, she could still be discovered. The cleansing room was located in the most remote part of the palace. Very few guards passed by it, but it did not mean that one could enter and leave as they pleased. The palace had always been lax on the inside and tight on the outside. Once one left a place that seemed empty, one would find countless imperial guards guarding it. Ning Chen did not doubt that if someone dared to sneak out at this time, they would be chopped up and fed to the dogs by the imperial guards. Ning Chen did not dare to go back to the cleansing room to search. These few days were a sensitive period. That stupid woman had entered the palace to assassinate the emperor of the Xia dynasty. She had created a huge mess. If he was suspected of anything, he would be in trouble. As the saying goes, Happiness is an itch that can be scratched. Unhappiness is an itch that cannot be scratched. At this moment, Ningchen felt that he was very unhappy. His heart was itching and he wanted to go to the cleansing room to take a look, but he could not. I'll go take a look from the front and the back. I'll go back to sleep if I'm standing. Ningchen took out a copper coin from his body and chanted. With a flick of his hand, the copper coin flew high into the air and drew a beautiful parabola in the air. Soon after, it fell to the ground with a tinkling sound and rolled forward. Seeing that the copper coin was about to fly away, Ningchen was anxious. This was the only thing he had. If someone asked Ningchen at this time whether money or life was the most important thing in life, Ningchen believed that he would say money without hesitation. Sure enough, in his anxiety, Ningchen didn't even care about the injuries between his legs, and ran after the copper coin step by step while baring his teeth. As the saying goes, blessings do not come in pairs, and misfortunes do not come singly. As the saying goes, if a person is unlucky, even drinking cold water will get stuck in his teeth. As the saying goes, if you don't seek death, you won't die. Ningchen was the type of person who would seek death by stuffing his teeth. He only cared about asking for money and didn't even look at where he was going. He bumped headfirst into a warm and fragrant embrace, and only then did he realize that things weren't going well. He hurriedly raised his head and saw a beautiful woman dressed in a luxurious phoenix robe. She was about 30 years old and had a gentle smile in her eyes which made Ningchen's heart flutter. Which family's servant is so daring to startle the Empress's phoenix body? Even if you have 10 heads, they won't be enough to chop off. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. In a panic, Ningchen hurriedly took 2 steps back and repeatedly apologized. But as soon as he opened his mouth, he wished he could slap himself for saying the wrong thing again. Apologizing to the Empress, he was really stupid. It was all that stupid woman's fault. After staying with a stupid person for so long, his brain wasn't as bright as before. How dare you? The face of the eunuch steward beside the Empress turned cold. He didn't know the rules at all. Why are you panicking so much? Zhang Sun Wuyo extended his hand and stopped the old eunuch from denouncing him. He smiled at the dignified youth in front of him and asked gently. Hearing Zhang Suan's question, Ningchen subconsciously looked at the copper coins that had stopped rolling on the ground. He was so regretful that he wanted to bang his head against the copper coins and die. The ancient people said to value money more than life. Was it because of him? Zhang Sun Wuyo followed Ning Chen's gaze and looked at the copper coins on the ground, then bent down to pick them up. Ning Chen looked at the copper coins being picked up by Zhang Sun Wuyo. He wanted to ask for it, but he didn't dare. In his confusion, he even forgot about offending the Empress. Actually, Ning Chen couldn't be blamed. It was almost impossible for a modern person to have a true fear of the so-called imperial power. Even though Ning Chen had constantly reminded himself to pay attention to his identity, he still threw aside the reverence that he had purposely shown for a moment. Zhang Sun Wuyo carefully looked at the copper coins in her hand and didn't find anything special about them. When she saw the youth's conflicted expression of wanting but not daring to ask for it, she couldn't help but laugh. How many years had it been since she met such an interesting little fellow? Be careful. The palace isn't like the outside. Remember to follow the rules. Zhang Sun Wuyo kindly reminded him, then continued to walk forward with light steps. My copper coins. Ning Chen looked on helplessly as the copper coins once again disappeared into the distance. His raised hand weakly put it down. The dignified Empress of Xia actually dared to take the money of a little eunuch like me. Nyang Nyang, he's still staring at you. Beside Zhang Sun Wuyo, a beautiful palace maid softly reminded her. He's probably still thinking about his copper coin. What an interesting little fellow. Since I've taken his copper coin, I'll help him this time. Send an order to the inner palace to transfer him to Weiyang Palace for duty. Ning Chen still didn't know that Zhang Sun Wuyo had decided his future the moment she spoke. Of course, if he knew earlier, Ning Chen would definitely rather die than obey. He would cry, throw a tantrum, and threaten to hang himself to ask Zhang Sun Wuyo to take back her grace. He was someone who wanted to run away. After he reached Weiyang Palace, running away would probably be impossible for him for the rest of his life. With the copper coins gone, Ning Chen's mood was very bad. His face was very long, as if he was very unhappy and didn't want anyone to come near him. Thinking back carefully, the copper coins had actually been standing on the ground when they fell, and had even rolled so far away. Stupid woman, you've killed me. After being frightened again and again, Ning Chen completely confirmed that there were too many big monsters in the palace. It was not a place where humans should live. Running away was the only way out. The assassination of Emperor Xia was a big event that shocked the world. The palace was the center of the storm. In just 2 short meetings, the world situation was revealed. An imperial concubine in the prime of her life and an empress who was the mother of the world. The 2 most noble women in the world walked out of the harem. It was definitely not as simple as just for show. Although Ning Chen's face was calm, his heart was in turmoil. Now, the palace was the most dangerous place. It was so for that woman, and also for him. The imperial concubine and the empress. One was sharp and dazzling, the other was reserved and gentle. After a simple meeting, Ning Chen had a rough impression in his heart. They were both beautiful faces, but they had completely different styles. But without a doubt, the 2 were not simple people. As an imperial concubine, she was not suppressed by the empress. This showed how sharp the imperial concubine was. And what Ning Chen couldn't see through was the empress. Standing on top of such a powerful imperial concubine, she could still stand for a long time. She was really extraordinary. The imperial concubine's sharpness came from inside out, and the empress' gentleness was not faked. Now that the sharp collision could be temporarily balanced, Ning Chen could no longer guess the turmoil in it. Thinking carefully, Ning Chen realized that after he came to this strange world, the only people he could talk to were either women or people who were neither men nor women. Moreover, none of them were easy to deal with. If he was not careful, he would get himself into trouble. He couldn't go to the cleansing room. Otherwise, he wouldn't necessarily meet anyone. Before he had the chance to run away, it was better to be honest. Ning Chen limped back to the dormitory. Looking at the group of youths with red lips and white teeth, he was in a bad mood. He covered his head and fell asleep. Perhaps it was because he had lost too much blood from that woman's slash, and he hadn't recovered from last night. Ning Chen slept until the sky turned dark, and then, dawn. Early the next morning, the door opened. People from each palace came to pick people up. After recuperating for nearly 2 days, most of the youths could barely get out of bed and walk 2 steps. Those who recovered quickly didn't need anyone's help. After following the people from each palace, they began their life as eunuchs. Ning Chen was also taken away by someone. It was a beautiful palace made with a graceful figure. She walked in front with graceful steps, and the way she walked was very seductive. Unfortunately, Ning Chen's bad mouth always sounded at the wrong time. Big sister, walk slower. The palace maid's name was Qing Ning. After hearing Ning Chen's words, her beautiful face was instantly filled with black lines. She wanted to kick this brat to death. Big sister, where are we going? Big sister, my injuries haven't healed yet. Walk slower. Big sister, how far is it? Big sister. Along the way, Ning Chen's long-winded voice reverberated in Qing Ning's ears. Qing Ning clenched and loosened her hands. She clenched and loosened them again. When she was about to explode, they arrived at Weiyang Palace. This was Zhang Sun Wuyo's territory. Although Ning Chen was ignorant, he knew that this was something everyone knew. His heart was in his mouth. Could it be that he bumped into her yesterday and now she's taking revenge on him? Ning Chen was very indignant. She's an adult. Why is she arguing with a child like me? Why? Are you not satisfied? At this moment, a familiar voice sounded in Ning Chen's ears. How can I? Ning Chen's expression changed instantly. His indignant face suddenly smiled brighter than a flower. He said respectfully with a bit of guilt. It's good that you're satisfied. You can be on duty at Weiyang Palace from now on. There are fewer rules here. I think it's most suitable for you. Zhang Sun Weo didn't care about Ning Chen's messy etiquette. Her beautiful and gentle face always had a gentle smile. She looked very approachable. Qing Ning has been with me since young. She knows everything about Weiyang Palace. If there's anything you don't understand, just ask Qing Ning. Alright, I still have things to do. I'll take my leave first. After saying that, Zhang Sun Weo and the two palace maids left. Only Qing Ning and Ning Chen were left standing there, staring at each other. Once Zhang Sun Weo left, Ning Chen felt uncomfortable all over. Qing Ning, on the other hand, felt refreshed all over. After enduring for so long, she finally had a proper reason to repay the kindness from before. Murderous aura. Ning Chen read the word from Qing Ning's eyes. She didn't hide it at all. Always leave a way out so that we can meet again in the future. Ning Chen immediately took a step back and admitted defeat. Good attitude. Unfortunately, it's too late. Qing Ning stretched out her delicate hand and grabbed the enemy in front of her. Her speed was so fast that Ning Chen didn't even have a chance to escape. Chapter 4. This woman knows martial arts. Ning Chen was shocked. Hooligans weren't scary, but hooligans with culture were scary. Now, this female hooligan who was very likely to be cultured actually knew martial arts. The moment he turned around, his collar was grabbed by Qing Ning. Immediately, he couldn't move. Let's talk nicely. A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists. Ning Chen couldn't be any softer. I'm not a gentleman, I'm just a little girl. Qing Ning didn't fall for this at all. She dragged Ning Chen to the back garden. You're using your position to avenge a personal grudge. Ning Chen complained while struggling. We just met. What personal grudge? Qing Ning snorted. How could she allow Ning Chen to put a big hat on her? That's right, we don't have any grudges. Ning Chen was startled. Only then did he realize that he and Qing Ning had no past grievances. What was there to be afraid of? Big sister, can you let go of me first? I'm a little dizzy. Ning Chen begged. After being dragged around by the collar for so long, he felt that it was hard to breathe. Why were there stars everywhere? However, when Qing Ning heard the two words big sister, she immediately felt the qi in her ren and du meridian surging. If she hadn't been influenced by her eldest grandson since she was young, she would have slapped this brat to death. Ning Chen didn't know why, but it was just a title. In any case, he wasn't even 16 yet. Was it too much to call Qing Ning big sister? It wasn't too much. Ning Chen felt even dizzier. No, this was the rhythm of being strangled to death. Big sister. Don't call me big sister. Qing Ning was about to go crazy. Her eyebrows arched, and she gnashed her teeth. Then what should I call you? Qing Ning. Qing Ning. Hurry up and let go of me. Otherwise, next year, you can burn incense for me. Qing Ning turned around and saw Ning Chen's red face. She was startled and immediately let go of him. Cough cough. Ning Chen violently coughed twice and then took a few deep breaths. Not long after, the dizziness disappeared and he finally felt that the world was beautiful again. Ning Chen wasn't an idiot. At this time, he also realized what was wrong. Just a title almost took his life. Women really were unreasonable creatures. Sister Qing Ning. Of course, men were also shameless creatures, especially Ning Chen. One moment he was being strangled to death by Qing Ning, and the next moment, he was trying to build a relationship with her with a fawning smile. As the saying goes, one does not hit a smiling person. Although Qing Ning did not want to forgive Ning Chen, she had no reason to do so. She could only suppress the raging fire in her stomach for the time being. Recuperate for 2 days first. When you've recovered, I'll arrange things for you. Qing Ning hesitated for a moment before she reminded him, the palace hasn't been very peaceful recently. Don't run around. Thank you, Sister Qing Ning, for your concern. Ning Chen grinned, his smile as bright as it could get. This great aunt looked fierce, but she was actually very kind. From now on, Qing Ning was a good person while the imperial consort was a bad person. The empress could not afford to offend her. From now on, she would curry favor with Qing Ning, avoid the empress, and run away whenever she saw the imperial consort. Ning Chen's room was near the back garden of Wei Yang Palace. It was far from the empress' bedroom. Wei Yang Palace had the least number of palace maids and eunuchs among the imperial consorts. Zhang Sun did not like noise, and Qing Ning did not like it either. Therefore, Ning Chen's luck was still very good. Because of 1 copper coin, he met Zhang Sun. In this palace where undercurrents were surging, he temporarily had a peaceful night. Ning Chen returned to his room. Through the window, he looked at the sky outside. He did not move, did not speak, and did not speak. Only when he calmed down did he realize that the sky outside was really different from his hometown. The boundless world of mortals was just a big dream. What are you thinking about? Unknowingly, a beautiful figure appeared behind him. Ning Chen came back to his senses. Only then did he realize that the sky outside was already dark. When did you come? Ning Chen was surprised and asked. I've been here for a long time. You just didn't realize it. Mu Qingxue replied. Is that so? I was too careless. Ning Chen smiled self-deprecatingly. A flash of sadness appeared in his eyes. Since he was already here, why would he act like a scholar and feel sorry for himself? That would only increase his sadness. I still don't know your name. Ning Chen calmed himself down and a smile appeared on his face again. Mu Qingxue. Black silk in the morning, snow in the evening. What a sad name. Ning Chen sighed softly. It's just a name. What about you? Mu Qingxue asked back. Ning Chen. The two of them were silent. They were two people who should not have known each other, but because of a strange fate, they met. Other than their names, there was nothing else they should know. Why did you assassinate the Xia Emperor? After an unknown amount of time, Ning Chen was the first to break the silence. Mu Qingxue did not immediately answer. Instead, he walked to the window and looked at the moon outside. After a long time, he softly said 2 words. Return a favor. Everyone says that the hardest thing to return in life is love. So it is true. Ning Chen did not continue to ask. There were deep and shallow relationships between people. Although he and Mu Qingxue had gone through trials and tribulations together, that was the end of their friendship. You saved me. Mu Qingxue owes you a favor. Mu Qingxue looked at the sky and asked himself when he would be able to return this favor. When would he be able to stop being bound by it? You also helped me. We don't owe each other anything. As if he could see through Mu Qingxue's weary heart, Ning Chen did not want to bind a woman like her. The shackles of love were too heavy. Ha! Mu Qingxue softly laughed. Her laughter was like a beautiful peony blooming in the night. It was so beautiful that it made people's hearts tremble. Ning Chen glanced at the woman beside him. His eyes flashed with admiration. You should stay here for the next few days. If you have the chance, you can think of a way to leave the palace. Ning Chen said. As he spoke, he saw that there were still traces of blood on Mu Qingxue's clothes and hair. He thought for a moment and continued, there are new clothes in the cabinet. You can wash them. I'll be leaving first. After saying that, Ning Chen walked out, leaving the room to Mu Qingxue. Looking at the departing figure, Mu Qingxue felt a faint warmth rise in his heart. It turned out that the burden of love was not only tiring. Bored out of his mind, Ning Chen walked to the backyard. Seeing that there was no one around, he stretched his legs. The wound was quite solid, so it didn't hurt too much. He carefully climbed up to the roof using a maple tree in the corner. Then, he lay down on the tiles and started counting the stars. 1, 2, 3. 125, 120, 127, 1197, 1198, 1199, Ning Chen was counting energetically. What he did not know was that in the room below him, Qing Ning was gritting her teeth and clenching her fists so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. Qing Ning practiced martial arts and was very sensitive to the movements around her. When Ning Chen was about to climb the wall, she had already noticed it. However, she was curious about what he was going to do, so she did not stop him. When she found out that he was only counting the stars, she let him be. Who would have thought that this guy was addicted to counting? He had already counted more than 1,100 stars. It was as if he could not finish counting. Qing Ning angrily put on her clothes and walked to the front of the room. She stomped her feet and flew up to the roof. She angrily looked at the culprit who disturbed her sleep. The sudden appearance of the figure in front of him startled Ning Chen. When he saw that it was Qing Ning, he breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Sister Qing Ning, you can't sleep, so you came up to look at the stars? Ning Chen did not know that the room below him belonged to Qing Ning. He thought that it was a coincidence and did not think of anything else. Are you comfortable lying down? Qing Ning gritted her teeth and asked. Her beautiful eyes flashed with a dangerous light in the night sky. She had the urge to throw Ning Chen down. It's okay. It's just a little cold. Ning Chen did not hear the dangerous message in Qing Ning's words and answered honestly. Do you need me to get you some clothes to cushion your body? Hearing Ning Chen's shameless answer, Qing Ning's anger exploded again. She opened her red lips and said in a low voice. No need, While speaking, Ning Chen felt that the atmosphere was not right. He looked at Qing Ning and his heart skipped a beat. Not good, killing intent. Sister Qing Ning, please sit. Ning Chen stood up and helped Qing Ning sit down with a smile on his face. Sister Qing Ning, you must be tired. Do you want me to help you massage your legs? No need. Massage your back? No need. Massage your shoulders? No need. Seeing that Qing Ning was stubborn, Ning Chen's sense of danger grew stronger. He carefully asked, Sister Qing Ning, it's so late. Why are you still awake? Wait a minute. Ning Chen suddenly realized that Qing Ning's clothes were different from the ones she was wearing during the day. It was obvious that she had just changed. When he thought of the room he was in, Ning Chen wanted to slap himself. If you don't seek death, you won't die. When you're unlucky, you can't even drink cold water. This was obviously Qing Ning's territory. He had been here for so long, but he had not thought of this problem. Qing Ning repeatedly told herself to endure. She realized that Ning Chen was not an ordinary person. In less than a day, he had already provoked her to the point of wanting to kill someone. Just as Qing Ning was about to criticize him, she heard Ning Chen's exclamation. She subconsciously followed his gaze. In the bustling starry sky, a blood-red star was shining with a terrifying light. Not far away, there was a dim red star. If one did not pay attention, it would be easy to overlook it. What's wrong? Qing Ning did not understand and asked. That blood-red star is called Constellation 2, and the dim star beside it is called Mars, which is what you call Mars. These two stars only meet once every 15 years, and it's very rare. If I'm not wrong, these two stars will meet in at most 2 days. Ning Chen sighed inwardly. He never thought that he would be able to see the legendary Mars guarding the heart here. His luck was really quite good. Only then did Qing Ning notice the dim red star. She immediately grabbed Ning Chen's arm and asked anxiously, "Is what you said true?" Ning Chen grimaced in pain from Qing Ning's grip. "Sister Qing Ning, it hurts." Qing Ning realized that she had lost her composure and quickly let go of Ning Chen. However, she still refused to give up and asked, "Hurry up and answer me. Is what you said true? Will these two stars really meet?" Gently rubbing his arm, Ning Chen nodded with certainty. "Yes, it's very likely. Moreover, it's very likely that it will happen tomorrow." "Oh no." Qing Ning's expression changed drastically. She stood up and stomped her feet, hurrying towards Zhang Suan's residence. "Strange." Ning Chen shook his head in confusion. He stood up and patted the dirt off his butt before swaggering back to sleep. Chapter 5. In Weiyang Palace, Zhang Sun, who had just taken off her clothes to sleep, was woken up by a series of urgent knocks on the door. In the entire Weiyang Palace, only Qing Ning could come here without prior notice. Zhang Sun knew Qing Ning's personality. If there wasn't anything important, she wouldn't be in such a hurry to ignore the rules. "Come in." Zhang Sun got up and put on her clothes. Zhang Sun was still beautiful after taking off her makeup. She was less noble and more gentle. Although she was over 30 years old, time hadn't left too many hardships on this beautiful woman. Instead, it made Zhang Sun, who had 30 years of experience, appear even more beautiful. "Your Highness, something happened." Qing Ning pushed open the door and rushed in. She looked at Zhang Sun on the bed. "Don't be in such a rush. Tell me slowly." Zhang Sun had experienced many things in her life, and her bearing naturally couldn't be compared to Qing Ning's. "Your Highness, come and look." Qing Ning pushed open the window and helped Zhang Sun to the window. She then pointed at a bright blood-colored star in the southern sky. "The Heart Imperial Star. What's wrong?" Zhang Sun didn't understand. "Look, isn't there a red star next to it?" Qing Ning pointed again. "Mars guarding the heart." "No, those two stars haven't met yet, and Mars guarding the heart is so dim." Zhang Sun was startled at first, but then she shook her head. Mars guarding the heart was a contrast between the two stars. Right now, only Mars guarding the heart was bright. Although the two stars were very close, they hadn't met yet. "Your Highness, they'll meet tomorrow." Qing Ning became even more worried when she saw Zhang Suan's disbelief. "Oh." Zhang Sun sensed that something was wrong. Qing Ning didn't understand the stars and wouldn't pay attention to such things. "What was going on today? Who told you?" A dangerous light flashed in Zhang Suan's eyes. Qing Ning didn't understand, but if someone was intentionally guiding her, then it was a different matter. Sensing the coldness in Zhang Suan's words, Qing Ning was startled, but she had no choice but to answer. "It was Ning Chen. That little fellow." Zhang Sun was startled. She had thought that the person from the Western Palace had intentionally sent someone to mislead Qing Ning. Now, it seemed that wasn't the case. Qing Ning told Zhang Sun everything Ning Chen had said tonight, including their meeting. She didn't leave out any details. At the beginning, when Zhang Sun heard Ning Chen climb the roof and count the stars, he couldn't help but laugh. However, when he heard the latter part, his expression gradually became serious. The Heart constellation was the Emperor's star, while Mars was the Calamity constellation. When the two met, it meant that Calamity was about to descend. "Bring Ning Chen here immediately," Zhang Sun ordered decisively. Inside the room, Ning Chen had just returned. He glanced at Mu Qingxue, who had washed himself clean. After taking a good rest, he hummed a little tune and went back to his bed to sleep. As for Mu Qingxue, such a big room was all hers. Clang, clang, Clang. Ning Chen was startled by the sound of someone knocking on the door. He hurriedly looked at Mu Qingxue and found that the latter had disappeared from the room. He was secretly relieved. I've done a lot of bad things recently, and I'm always scared. Ning Chen patted his head in frustration, then walked to the door and saw Qing Ning standing there. Just as he was about to speak, he was dragged out. At this moment, Ning Chen finally understood what it meant to walk as fast as flying. They were walking, but it felt as if they were flying. They had covered such a long distance in just a few breaths. Ning Chen felt airsick. He stood on the ground and swayed. In a daze, he was dragged to Zhang Sun by Qing Ning. Zhang Sun looked at the young man in front of her from head to toe, as if she wanted to see through him. Unfortunately, even Zhang Sun, who had seen countless people, couldn't figure out what Ning Chen was thinking and what he wanted. Ning Chen. Yes, ah. Hearing someone call him, Ning Chen woke up from his daze. Seeing Zhang Sun in front of him, he was so scared that he stepped back and almost screamed. Ning Chen had long believed that Zhang Sun was a two-faced woman. Not only did she take his money, but she also didn't let go of his men. Was it easy to mess around in the Empress's territory? Of course not. You're afraid of me, Zhang Sun said strangely. Was her reputation so bad that people were so scared of her? Would Ning Chen tell the truth? Would he tell the truth? Of course not, unless he didn't want to mess around. Everyone knows that Your Highness is virtuous and virtuous. It's just that I was pulled too hard by Sister Qing Ning, and my legs are a little numb. Ning Chen didn't forget to complain about Qing Ning as he flattered her, saying that she always bullied him. So what if you have martial arts? So what? So what? To the side, Qing Ning gritted her teeth. If Zhang Sun wasn't here, she would definitely beat this brat to death. Ha! How could Zhang Sun not see through Ning Chen's thoughts? She chuckled but didn't point it out. Was what you said to Qing Ning true? At the mention of this, Zhang Sun's expression became serious again. This was a matter of great importance. If it was true, things would be troublesome. Because just today, Emperor Xia seemed to have made up his mind to send out his troops. It was very likely that he would officially issue a decree the next day. At that time, she and Consort One of the Western Palace were both present. They both saw Emperor Xia's determination. What did I say? Ning Chen was confused by Zhang Sun's question. He and Qing Ning had talked so much, and most of it was nonsense. How could he know which sentence she was referring to? You understand the stars? Zhang Sun asked again. I don't, Ning Chen replied honestly. Qing Ning's slender hand clenched. Her gaze was about to cut Ning Chen into 18 pieces. Hearing Ning Chen's answer, Zhang Sun frowned. If it weren't for her long years of self-restraint, she would have kicked him already. Then why did you tell Qing Ning that Mars and the Heart Imperial Star would meet tomorrow? As she spoke, Zhang Sun stared at Ning Chen. This wasn't a game. If there was even the slightest lie, she definitely wouldn't be merciful. Common sense? Ning Chen thought disdainfully. Of course, he only thought about it in his heart. He respectfully said, replying to the Empress, when this lowly one was young, I once heard an expert mention the phenomenon of Mars guarding the heart. That's how I learned about it. Are you confident? Zhang Sun frowned and asked again. 80 to 90%, Ning Chen replied modestly. Zhang Sun's frown deepened. Clearly, she was very dissatisfied with this answer. 80 to 90% meant that there was still at least a 10% chance that there would be an exception. But how could there be any accidents when it came to national affairs? Seeing Zhang Sun's beautiful eyes continue to stare at him, Ning Chen felt helpless. She really didn't know how to appreciate modesty. It will definitely happen. Although he secretly despised her, Ning Chen still changed his answer honestly. 100%? Zhang Sun asked in a low voice. 100%. Ning Chen said seriously. All right, I believe you. Zhang Sun stood up. A look of determination flashed across her beautiful face. Qing Ning, send us to the Heavenly Mandate Palace. Yes. Zhang Sun and Qing Ning left. Ning Chen was dumbfounded. How could he go back? He gritted his teeth and cursed the two of them as he walked. It took him a few breaths to get here, but it took him a long time to get back. Weiyang Palace wasn't small. After turning left and right, he almost couldn't find his room. The light in his room had been extinguished. Ning Chen thought for a while. When he left, the candle was still lit. And it didn't seem to be a problem for it to burn for half the night. Gently pushing the door open, Ning Chen quietly walked to his bed. He saw a seductive figure asleep. Suddenly, his right hand pointed at the bed and trembled with anger. The bed is mine. The quilt is also mine. Ning Chen screamed in his heart. He really wanted to throw this ungrateful woman down. But when he thought of the stark difference in their strength, he immediately wilted. How could she let him live? How could she let him live? Ning Chen fiercely waved his fist at Mu Qingxue. Why were all women so annoying? Qing Ning was a bad person, Zhang Sun was a bad person, and Mu Qingxue was also a bad person. Ning Chen thought about whether he should go up and squeeze, but he was afraid that he would be taken advantage of. In the end, he decided not to give this woman a chance to take advantage of him. Ka. He found 4 stools and put them together to make a makeshift bed. He spread a thick cotton cushion on it and then lay down happily. Ning Chen comfortably exhaled and sighed with emotion from the bottom of his heart. I'm really a talent. No, I'm really a genius. That woman's martial arts are very high. Be careful. On the bed, Mu Qingxue suddenly opened his eyes and lightly said. Yes, I know. Ning Chen subconsciously responded. Then, his body moved and fell to the ground with a bang. He said in shock, You're not asleep. I woke up when you were about to enter. Mu Qingxue opened his eyes and said. Ha, ha. Ning Chen dryly laughed twice. How could he forget that this woman was a ruthless person who dared to assassinate the Xia Emperor? How could she not even hear his footsteps? Ning Chen climbed back onto his makeshift bed. Suddenly, he remembered Mu Qingxue's words. He couldn't help but ask curiously, then who's stronger? You or her? Me. Mu Qingxue honestly said. You really don't know how to be modest. Ning Chen curled his lips and thought. However, if she wanted to harm you, even 100 of you wouldn't be her opponent. Mu Qingxue added. After these words, Ning Chen's chest stagnated. It was as if an iron hammer had fallen and 10,000 horses galloped. His little bit of self-esteem was instantly trampled 100 times, 1,000 times. Turning his head, Ning Chen prepared to ignore her. Too hateful. Only if she doesn't want to hurt you. Mu Qingxue added. Ning Chen didn't say anything and pretended not to hear. You're too weak for her. Mu Qingxue added. Ning Chen endured again. I'm a genius, who's afraid of? Unfortunately, she's a woman. Mu Qingxue's words hit the nail on the head. Ning Chen sat up and fiercely glared at Mu Qingxue. I want to learn martial arts. On the bed, Mu Qingxue stared blankly for a moment before indifferently saying, You're not cut out for this. Ah! Ning Chen felt like he was about to explode. Too hateful, too demoralizing. I'm a genius. Ning Chen hypnotized himself. You're not. Mu Qingxue mercilessly shattered this beautiful dream. Ning Chen angrily glared at Mu Qingxue. In the dark night, they were like 2 angry lanterns. I'm going to sleep. Mu Qingxue turned around and pretended not to see. Ning Chen was unmoved. He continued to stare at Mu Qingxue, wanting to use his powerful mental strength to oppress his opponent. After a cup of tea, Ning Chen was still persevering. His gaze was as sharp as a sword. After half an incense stick of time, Ning Chen persevered. His gaze was still tyrannical. After an incense stick of time, Ning Chen rubbed his eyes and gritted his teeth. After 2 hours, Ning Chen's eyes were hazy with tears. He kept yawning. Another hour passed by. Ning Chen unwillingly fell asleep. Chapter 6. In the Heavenly Mandate Palace, Emperor Xia was still reading the memorials. Among the past emperors, although the current Emperor Xia was not considered a wise one, he was definitely the most diligent one. However, his hesitant personality became his greatest impediment, causing his achievements to fall far short of those of the past emperors. The Xia dynasty had stopped and had not advanced for 30 years. However, in today's turbulent world, defending one's achievements was a failure, and not achieving anything was a mistake. I cannot be a sinner of the Xia dynasty. Emperor Xia knew his weakness, so this time, he was determined to send troops to the Beijiang plain. He would not tolerate anyone who challenged the dignity of the Xia dynasty. However, the will of the heavens was unpredictable. Even the emperor could not predict the will of the heavens. Empress, is what you said true? On the dragon throne, Emperor Xia looked serious and asked in a low voice. He was in his 40s, but half of his hair had turned white. Emperor Xia had not made any mistakes in his life. He had defended what he had achieved, but he had also worked hard. He had supported such a great dynasty alone. Although he had a no-doubts body, he was close to death. Absolutely true. Zhang Sun looked at the man who had accompanied her for half her life and sighed. She remembered the words of the elders when she was young, and she did it with all her heart. As for love, perhaps it did not belong to the family of emperors. She had never thought about it. Only her early white hair showed the ruthlessness of time. Announced the arrival of the imperial astronomer. The imperial edict was sent out, and the horses rushed out of the palace, heading east. The people in the palace waited silently. Emperor Xia walked down the platform and came to the front of the palace. Beside the bright heart imperial star, there was a red star shining with red light. It was very faint, but it was very dazzling. Mars guards the heart. Emperor Xia looked bitter. Was he really going to bear the name of an incapable ruler for the rest of his life? Zhang Sun did not go forward. She was silent. The harem should not interfere in politics. Her reminder was enough. Your Majesty, the imperial astronomer has arrived and is waiting outside the palace. Not long after, a messenger eunuch came in to report. Emperor Xia's bitter expression immediately regained the dignity of an emperor. Announce. As you wish. At this moment, Zhang Sun also stood up and came before Emperor Xia. She curtsied and said, I will take my leave first. Okay. Emperor Xia nodded in agreement. It would have been inappropriate for the empress to be present when the officials had an audience with the emperor. It would have been especially inappropriate for her to be present at such a sensitive time. After Zhang Sun left, the head of the imperial astronomer, Shengguan Yuanming, entered the palace. After bowing, he waited for the Xia emperor to rise. However, after waiting for a long time, Shengguan Yuanming still did not hear the Xia emperor speak. Suddenly, his body trembled, and cold sweat dripped down. Shengguan Yuanming, the Xia emperor said, his voice devoid of any emotion. Your servant is here. Shengguan Yuanming lowered his head and said in a trembling voice. How long have you been the head of the imperial astronomer? The Xia emperor continued to ask. 10 years and 3 months. The fear in Shengguan Yuanming's heart grew more and more serious. His face was deathly pale, and his body trembled. Very good, very good. Emperor Xia repeated. His originally calm face suddenly turned ruthless. With a bang, he slapped the table beside him. 10 years and 3 months. Even if we were to raise a dog, it would have matured by now. I am guilty. Shengguan Yuanming pleaded guilty in fear and kowtowed. Where is your crime? The Xia Emperor's ruthless face gradually calmed down as he coldly asked. Your servant is lacking in talent and knowledge. I have failed to live up to your trust. Shangguan Yuanming's voice trembled as he kowtowed. Lacking in talent and knowledge? What a lacking in talent and knowledge? Seeing that Shangguan Yuanming was still hiding something, the Xia Emperor could no longer suppress his anger. He grabbed the teacup on the table and threw it down. With a bang, the teacup smashed into Shangguan Yuanming's head. Immediately, a pool of blood flowed out, dyeing the palace in front of him red. Speak! Who ordered you to do this? The Xia Emperor stared fixedly at Shangguan Yuanming. He was not an idiot. The imperial astronomer was full of capable people. How could they not have divined such an important astronomical phenomenon like Mars guarding the heart? There must have been someone behind the scenes who had deliberately suppressed this news to facilitate the deployment of troops. Mars guarding the heart had foretold the calamity of war since ancient times. If he deployed troops at this time, he would undoubtedly become a tyrant who incited the flames of war in the eyes of the world. The Great Xia would also become the target of public criticism. At that time, the Great Xia would no longer be facing the Mongol imperial court, but the condemnation of the entire world. Coupled with the restless eternal night cult, the Great Xia's 1,000 years of foundation would be completely destroyed, and he would be the sinner of the Great Xia. Thinking of this, the Xia Emperor's body could not help but tremble. The fear and anger that he had suppressed were about to erupt once again. Your servant did not order you to do this. Shangguan Yuanming raised his head. Blood flowed down his forehead, dyeing half of his face red. At this moment, he had calmed down and replied in a low voice. Good, very good. The Xia Emperor took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and said coldly. Men, lock Shangguan Yuanming in the death row. Also, send the imperial army to surround Shangguan Yuanming's residence. Without my orders, no one is allowed to enter or leave. Yes. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 imperial bodyguards walked into the main hall and dragged Shangguan Yuanming out. In the entire heavenly mandate palace, only the Xia Emperor sat on the dragon throne, looking at the sky in front of him without saying a word. After a long time, the Xia Emperor's face suddenly flushed red. Then, with a poof, he vomited blood. I cannot be the sinner of the Great Xia. How sorrowful and how difficult it was. The human emperor who controlled the world, the sun and the moon, the gods of the mortal world, could fight against the will of the people, but could not win against the will of the heavens. Whether it was the will of the heavens or the will of the gods, with this mouthful of blood, it was clear. The 1,000-year-old dynasty was glory and pressure. The Xia Emperor shouldered the glory of the Great Xia for 1,000 years. Every step he took, he had to weigh 10 steps. Whether he was cautious or hesitant, he could not tell. In the cold night, a gentle breeze blew. The Xia Emperor sat alone on the high and cold dragon throne. He was indifferent to the drops of blood that stained his dragon robe. Outside the main hall, the imperial army stood guard, but did not dare to take half a step in. This was the Emperor of the Great Xia. As long as he was sitting on the supreme dragon throne, no one would dare to disobey him. The most ruthless thing was the heart of an emperor. The Xia Emperor's ruthlessness was not only to others, but also to himself. His hair was white, and his body was like a lamp without oil. He had been an emperor for 20 years, but he had lived 100 years in the mortal world. I am not satisfied, not satisfied. Thousands of words turned into unsatisfied laughter. In the night, the gradually clear Mars suddenly lit up, and then dimmed again. The silent change seemed to be mocking the ignorance of the human emperor. In the morning court the next day, the expected order to send troops was not issued. The officials were all surprised. They all looked at the 3 chancellors. The only people who could change the mind of the Xia Emperor were the 3 chancellors. However, the 3 chancellors remained silent and did not express any opinions. After the morning court, the officials left. They all had their own thoughts and did not show their joy or sorrow. When the three chancellors were about to leave, the Xia emperor stepped forward and looked at the grand advisor in a green robe. He asked seriously, "Teacher, if I take the wrong path this time, will you intervene?" The grand advisor was silent. After a long time, he said, "Yes." The casual answer seemed to give the Xia emperor the greatest confidence. It let him know that when he reached a dead end on the path of the emperor, there would be a teacher to help him. The three chancellors left quietly. The Xia emperor still sat alone in the heavenly mandate palace. He handled the affairs of the world silently as usual. Weiyang Palace. Ning Chen woke up early in the morning and worked in front of the door for a long time. Mu Qingxue glanced at him and lost interest. Such a small mechanism could only deal with a child. Ning Chen did not care about Mu Qingxue's thoughts. He finished his work and was about to go eat. Before he went out, he looked at Mu Qingxue and grinned. His smile was brighter than a flower. "Who told you to be arrogant? Now you have no food to eat." Weiyang Palace had a place for maids and eunuchs to eat. Ning Chen was now a free man and came to get food. There were not many people in the cafeteria. This, and this, Ning Chen excitedly ordered this and that. The old eunuch who served the rice also served enough. It was obvious that Zhang Xuan's palace treated the servants well. "And this?" "Yes, take it away." Ning Chen pointed at a pot of red braised pork, his eyes shining. Ning Chen looked up and suddenly found the old eunuch standing there motionless. He could not help but wonder, "What's wrong? Can't I take it?" "What do you mean by taking it away?" The old eunuch reacted and asked in confusion. It was a common question, but it put Ning Chen in a dilemma. Looking at the bowl and spoon in the old eunuch's hand, he was confused. There was no plastic bag, no lunch box. How to take it away, how to take it away, how to take it away. Ning Chen was confused. In a daze, he held the steamed bun and carried the 3 plates out of the cafeteria. After giving birth, "You'll suffer from the cold." Before he left, Ning Chen whimpered to the old eunuch who was also in a state of confusion. As for whether or not he understood what Ning Chen said, it was not his problem. On the way, he met Qing Ning. Qing Ning died. Qing Ning frowned, and then she was also confused. Fortunately, Ning Chen did not know the people he met later, so he did not have to greet them. He quickly went back to his room and kicked the door, "Bring Ye En." In the room, Mu Qingxue was about to open the door when he heard Ning Chen's footsteps, but he stopped when he heard this strange sound. "Bring Ye En." Ning Chen walked for a while with the plate in his mouth. He felt that his cheeks were almost numb. Seeing that Mu Qingxue did not open the door for him, he became anxious. He was tired to death. Mu Qingxue focused for a moment. After confirming that Ning Chen was alone outside, he carefully opened the door. Dang dang, dang dang. Seeing that the door was finally opened, Ning Chen hurriedly squeezed in. He ran a step and put the plates in his hand and in his mouth on the table. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. Too much. Ning Chen realized that he was tongue-tied. He was shocked and quickly rubbed his cheeks. Time to eat. Ning Chen was tongue-tied, but he could not wait to sit down. He took out the steamed bun and prepared to eat. Mu Qingxue looked at the plate and steamed bun that Ning Chen had taken. His eyes flickered a few times. Finally, he sat down facing Ning Chen. The food is still good. Ning Chen happily put a piece of red braised pork in his mouth. He was very satisfied. He was bleeding, so he needed to eat something good to nourish his body. Looking at the satisfied young man in front of him, Mu Qingxue was silent. After a while, he asked softly, "Do you really want to learn martial arts?" Chapter 7. Ning Chen raised his head in surprise. Last night, he spent half the night trying to change Mu Qingxue's mind. Today, He managed to buy her over with just one meal. Could it be that he was blinded by gifts? Whatever. Ning Chen put another piece of meat into his mouth and said indifferently. Yesterday, he was just joking with Mu Qingxue. Although he was envious of those who could fly, it was important to know one's own limits. Since Mu Qingxue said that he was not cut out for it, it meant that his talent was not that good. I can teach you a special mental cultivation method. Mu Qingxue said. Is it powerful? Hearing the word special, Ning Chen became interested again and asked. What do you mean? Mu Qingxue asked. Can I beat you after learning it? Ning Chen asked with expectation. Mu Qingxue shook his head. What about Qing Ning? Ning Chen lowered his standards. Mu Qingxue shook his head again. What about the leader of the guards that came in to arrest us? Ning Chen did not have much expectation left. Mu Qingxue shook his head again. Then why should I learn it? Ning Chen lost his motivation and asked with flagging interest. To strengthen the body. Wow, so special. Ning Chen took a bite of the steamed bun and pretended to be surprised. Don't regret it. Mu Qingxue did not force him and said indifferently. Huh. Ning Chen felt that Mu Qingxue's tone was a bit unusual, as if he missed a great opportunity. Is this mental cultivation method very special? Ning Chen asked carefully. Yes. What's special about it? Ning Chen asked again. Precious. Why is it precious? Ning Chen continued to ask. Special. Ning Chen painfully realized that this woman was sent by the heavens to punish him. Not only did she cut him, but she also wanted to torture him mentally. I'll learn it. Ning Chen took a bite of the steamed bun and said with gritted teeth. Okay, wait first. Why? Mu Qingxue looked at Ning Chen and said slowly, the mental cultivation method is not with me. Ah. 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 Ning Chen could not stand it anymore. He stood up and pointed at Mu Qingxue with a trembling finger. His lips were trembling with anger. This is too much. However, I know where the mental cultivation method is. Ignoring Ning Chen's anger, Mu Qingxue continued. Before Ning Chen could vent his anger, he sat down weakly. His heart was bleeding. Zhang Wuji's mother was right. The more beautiful a woman was, the more dangerous she was. Ning Chen decided that he had to calm down, calm down, calm down. Crack, the chopsticks in Ning Chen's hand broke. Fine, he admitted that he couldn't calm his heart, nor could he calm his anger. Where? Ning Chen decided to ask one last time. Emperor Xia's imperial study. Ning Chen fiercely slapped himself on the face. Why did you ask? Do you want to learn it? Mu Qingxue confirmed seriously. Ning Chen didn't say anything. He buried his head in his food, determined to ignore her. Don't regret it. Ning Chen took a big bite of the bun and stuffed it into his mouth. Here, this medicine is for you. Mu Qingxue casually tossed over a small box. What's it for? Ning Chen couldn't help but ask. It's to save my life, Mu Qingxue said carelessly. Why are you giving it to me? Don't you want to use it? Ning Chen was happy. It seemed that he still had some status in Mu Qingxue's heart. You're too weak. You need it more than I do, Mu Qingxue said indifferently. Ning Chen's left hand and right hand slapped his mouth. Why did you have such a cheap mouth? Why did you have such a cheap mouth? After the conversation ended, Mu Qingxue didn't say anything else. He quietly ate his food. His pleasing appearance was much better than someone else's. After the meal, Ning Chen hummed a tune and went to the back garden for a stroll. At this time, most of the eunuchs and palace maids were busy. There was no one in the back garden. Compared to being bored to death in the room and being angered to death by Mu Qingxue, he felt that looking at the flowers was a good choice. However, he forgot that Qing Ning's room was right next to the back garden. In the room, Qing Ning was just about to go to the Empress's room. Zhang Sun had to go out of the palace today. She was a palace maid trained by Zhang Sun. Not only was she responsible for the daily arrangements of Weiyang Palace, but she was also responsible for Zhang Suan's safety. Just as she was about to go out, Qing Ning saw Ning Chen's bored expression. She thought of how he told on her in front of Zhang Sun last night. She was instantly angry. Ning Chen, Qing Ning glared and shouted. Oh! Ah, Sister Qing Ning. Ning Chen saw Qing Ning and immediately smiled. He ran over to greet her. Come with me, Qing Ning said with internal injuries. She had nowhere to vent her anger. Why? Go out of the palace with the Empress. Oh. Out of the palace. A certain person's eyes lit up. However, when he thought of Mu Qingshua's martial arts summary that Qing Ning was more powerful than 100 Ning Chens, his interest instantly disappeared. Sister Qing Ning, can you teach me martial arts? Ning Chen desperately wanted to get rid of this seriously unbalanced right to speak. Qing Ning looked at Ning Chen in surprise. After thinking for a while, she said tactfully, what I learn is not suitable for you. Why? Ning Chen didn't give up and asked. You're not cut out for it, Qing Ning had to tell him the truth. Ning Chen wanted to die. He couldn't take the opportunity to run away, and he still had to face Zhang Sun. After being forced by Qing Ning to change his clothes for leaving the palace, Ning Chen's mood was gloomy. He followed behind her listlessly, like a small sapling destroyed by the wind and rain. When he saw Zhang Sun, the sedan chair had been prepared and they were ready to leave. Zhang Sun was dressed plainly today. She didn't wear a phoenix coronet and pearls. Her beautiful face was clean and she didn't wear any makeup. Compared to usual, she looked less luxurious and more amiable. It's all an illusion, Ning Chen warned himself. His preconceived notions made him think that Zhang Sun was a two-faced woman. All the beautiful appearances were illusions to confuse people. Ning Chen believed in his own judgment, so he tried his best to avoid Zhang Suan's gaze. Zhang Sun had already seen Ning Chen behind Qing Ning, but she didn't say anything. She could tell that he had been avoiding her, as if he was afraid of her, but not like the people in the palace who were afraid of her. If she had to describe it, he was like a child who had done something wrong and was avoiding his parents' gaze. It had to be said that Zhang Suan's intuition was frighteningly accurate. Ning Chen had a lot of secrets, so of course he didn't want to see her. Every time they met, his heart would beat like a drum. Compared to the kind and simple Qing Ning, the clever Zhang Sun was no different from a demon in Ning Chen's eyes. Fortunately, no matter how smart Zhang Sun was, she couldn't have guessed that Ning Chen was a fake eunuch, let alone connect him to the assassination. When Zhang Sun left the palace, she didn't bring many guards with her. In this world, there were so many people who wanted to assassinate the Xia emperor that they had to line up for 10 days to half a month. However, there were few who wanted to harm Zhang Sun. Zhang Sun was famous for being a virtuous empress. Her reputation among the people was much better than that of the Xia emperor. Ning Chen didn't know why Zhang Sun left the palace, so he could only follow behind the sedan with an unhappy expression. Along the way, he looked at the bustling streets, and his heart itched with envy. Qing Ning was the closest to the sedan. If Zhang Sun needed anything, she could just lift the curtain and give orders. Ning Chen's position was inconspicuous, and he wasn't wearing palace robes. If one didn't pay attention, he would be no different from a passerby. The thought of running away flashed through Ning Chen's mind again and again. However, every time he saw Qing Ning's unintentional gaze, he immediately became as obedient as he could be. Whoosh! A sudden chill caused Ning Chen's pupils to shrink. He saw 3 arrows flying towards Zhang Suan's sedan from different directions. They came for no reason, just like when they tried to assassinate the Xia emperor. It was too late to react. Be careful! Before he could shout, a beautiful figure flashed before Ning Chen's eyes. Her clothes fluttered, and 2 of the arrows were swept back. However, it was only a short delay. he couldn't block the third arrow in time. Ugh! Blood splattered everywhere. It was a shocking failure. Qing Ning couldn't block it in time. She placed herself in front of Zhang Xuan's sedan, and the arrow pierced through her body. Blood spurted out and dyed half of the sedan red. Bang! The arrow trembled. It had no more strength to pierce through the sedan. The red arrow trembled continuously, and blood splattered everywhere. Qing Ning was forced back 2 steps by the remaining force of the arrow. She vomited another mouthful of blood. Sister Qing Ning. Ning Chen took 3 steps forward and caught Qing Ning, who was about to fall. At that moment, she was right in front of him, but she seemed so far away. Hold on. Ning Chen's heart ached. He extended his hand to cover Qing Ning's wound, but he couldn't stop the spurting blood. In the next moment, dazzling blade lights appeared in all directions. 12 black-clothed guards held back the guards. At the same time, 4 green-clothed guards appeared. Their scimitars slashed down. Seeing that her life was in danger, Qing Ning pulled Ning Chen behind her. She endured the heavy injury to her chest and slapped the sedan. Immediately, a silver spear flew out. She held it tightly in her hand, and the blade lights swept in all directions. Bang! When the 2 sides clashed, the 4 green-clothed guards flew back 10 meters. As soon as they landed, they stepped on the ground and charged forward once more. The 4 blade lights worked together seamlessly, sealing off all paths of retreat. Take the Empress away. Qing Ning knew that she couldn't escape unscathed. She pushed Ning Chen away, a resolute light flashing in her eyes. With her heavy injuries, Qing Ning's body was limited. When they clashed again, the spear was dyed red once more. Blood flowed from her hand, and her spear almost slipped out of her hand. Let's go. If we wait any longer, it'll be too late. Qing Ning tore apart her clothes and wrapped her spear around her right hand. Her solemn gaze contained the final determination of her life. Qing Ning held her spear horizontally in front of the sedan, not allowing anyone to take half a step past her. Empress, let's go. Ning Chen glanced at Qing Ning. Then he helped Zhang Xuan up and quickly ran towards the fleeing crowd. You want to leave? The 4 green-clothed guards abandoned Qing Ning and chased after Ning Chen and Zhang Xuan. Humph. With a cold snort, the spear in Qing Ning's hand shot out like a swallow. Silver light flashed through the air, forcing the 4 of them to turn around. Today, no one will be able to take half a step past this line. Qing Ning's injuries were heavy, and her blood was about to run out. But it was hard to stop her unyielding will. With her spear in hand, her entire body was bathed in blood. She stood alone, regardless of life or death, she would protect Zhang Xuan. Qing Ning. Zhang Xuan was being dragged forward by Ning Chen. When she turned around, tears fell from her eyes like rain. Ning Chen, save her. Her pleading voice couldn't stop them from moving forward. Ning Chen didn't turn around. He continued to pull Zhang Xuan forward. From start to finish, he didn't turn around even once. Chapter 8. Every strike of the blood-stained silver spear brought out a large amount of blood. It was the blood of others, but it was also Qing Ning's own blood. The wound on her chest could not be healed. As she waved the silver spear, the wound tore open. Blood flowed out and completely dyed her white clothes red. The 4 green-robed men did not want to waste any time. Their moves were ruthless, and every move was fatal. Qing Ning blocked the attacks with her spear alone. She only attacked and did not defend herself. She fought against the combined attacks of the 4 men. Chi! Seeing the swords coming at her again, Qing Ning did not dodge. She took the attack head-on. She turned the silver spear in her hand, and with a thunderous strike, she shattered the arms of the 4 men. One move for another. How many can you block? The leader of the 4 green-robed men said. His eyes flashed coldly. They had failed to assassinate Zhang Sun. When they returned, they would be severely punished. Who would have thought that a palace made by Zhang Sun's side would be so capable? Qing Ning did not answer. It was unknown whether it was because she was unwilling or because she had no strength left. Her originally plain white clothes were no longer of its original color. A gentle breeze blew, blowing her long hair. In a trance, there seemed to be a faint mist of blood dancing. It's over. The leader of the green-robed men saw that Qing Ning was like a lamp that had run out of oil. He waved his scimitar. Rays of green light circled around like dragons. At the same time, the other 3 men cooperated and rushed forward, wanting to end the life of the woman in front of them. The 4 rays of light were unparalleled. With the support of the 4 men's martial arts, they were unstoppable. There was no chance of survival. Seeing the fatal attacks, Qing Ning's gradually lifeless eyes exploded with a dazzling light. Amidst the shredded clothes, the silver spear left her hand and spun wildly. I've already said that no one should even think of taking half a step past this line. Qing Ning did not retreat. Instead, she advanced. Beside her, the silver spear spun rapidly, stirring up the surrounding wind and clouds, forming a huge vortex. This was the last move. Qing Ning used all her cultivation to protect the line behind her. This was her life's dedication, and also Zhang Sun's lifeline. Boom! As their moves collided, the heavens and earth shook and dust filled the air. The weapons in the hands of the 5 people were unable to withstand the huge force and all of them shattered. The shocking power shook the guards and the black-clothed man who were fighting not far away and sent them flying back a few steps. Ah! In the aftermath, the 4 green-robed men tasted something sweet in their throats and vomited. Their bodies trembled and they almost lost their balance. Not far away, the beautiful blood-soaked figure still stood tall, leaning against the palanquin. Her eyes gradually lost their luster. Her last glance in this life was filled with gratification. She had defended the line and protected her eldest grandson's life. In this life, she had no regrets. Unfortunately, she would never hear that infuriating fellow call her sister Qing Ning again. No. Qing Ning subconsciously turned to look at the source of the cry. Unfortunately, her absent-minded eyes could no longer see the person. Vaguely, she seemed to see a familiar figure reflected in her eyes. In the end, it turned into endless darkness. Sister Qing Ning. Ning Chen took a few steps forward to support Qing Ning. His eyes were filled with grief as he glanced at the 4 people standing not too far away. For the first time, intense hatred flashed through his heart. Carefully placing Qing Ning next to the palanquin, Ning Chen's left hand finally revealed the copper stove. Taking out a match, he immediately lit up a hemp rope covered in lamp oil at the mouth of the stove. Seeing that the fire was strong, it followed the lamp oil and entered the copper stove. Ning Chen swung his hands, then quickly turned around and hugged Qing Ning. In the next moment, a terrifying explosion shook the entire world. The 4 heavily injured men could not avoid it. They were blown away by the terrifying aftermath and fell to the ground. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Cough cough. In order to protect Qing Ning, Ning Chen had to bear part of the aftermath. Instantly, his internal organs were shaken. Drops of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Amidst the smoke and dust, Ning Chen did not have time to check his injuries. He carried Qing Ning and ran to the side of the street without looking back. Duan Pharmacy. Zhang Sun stood at the door and kept looking. Although his face was calm, he could not hide the anxiety in his eyes. About half an hour later, Ning Chen ran back with Qing Ning covered in blood. Seeing this, Zhang Sun immediately went forward to check. When he saw Qing Ning's miserable state, his eyes immediately turned red. However, Zhang Sun was the empress after all. After a short moment of panic and helplessness, she immediately regained her senses. Only now did she realize that Ning Chen's current state was not much better. His clothes were ragged and he was in an extremely sorry state. Come in quickly. Zhang Sun quickly brought Ning Chen into the backyard of the pharmacy. Duan Pharmacy was the property of the Zhang Sun family in the imperial city. Moreover, the shopkeeper would report to the Zhang Sun family every once in a while. Before Zhang Sun entered the palace, she had often helped with the family's accounts. Thus, the shopkeeper was not unfamiliar with Zhang Sun. Ning Chen carefully placed Qing Ning on the bed. The shopkeeper immediately brought medicine and a white cloth to stop the bleeding. After the bleeding had temporarily stopped, he had time to check her pulse. On the side, Ning Chen and Zhang Sun waited anxiously. When they saw the shopkeeper's expression become more and more unsightly, their hearts gradually sank. How is it? Seeing the shopkeeper stand up, Zhang Sun took a step forward and asked anxiously. Lady Qing Ning's internal organs are severely injured. In addition, she has lost more than half of her qi and blood. There is no medicine that can save her, the shopkeeper sighed softly and answered truthfully. No medicine that can save her. At this moment, even someone as calm as Zhang Sun couldn't help but stiffen. She sat down in a daze. Hearing the shopkeeper's answer, Ning Chen's heart also fiercely shrank. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he took a step forward and took out a small box from his bosom. He hurriedly opened it. This was something that Mu Qingxue had given him. It was said that it could save his life. As for whether it was useful or not, he couldn't care so much right now. He stuffed the medicine into Qing Ning's mouth. The medicine quickly melted and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Zhang Sun saw Ning Chen's actions and nervous expression, and a glimmer of hope rose in her heart again. The shopkeeper also went forward to check her pulse again. After a long time, he still shook his head and sighed, it's no good. Although she has protected her last breath, she has lost too much qi and blood. Empress, you should be mentally prepared. I understand, Zhang Sun's heart ached as she nodded. What do you understand? Hurry up and give her a blood transfusion. Ning Chen was anxious. He didn't care about seniority and hurriedly said. Hearing Ning Chen's strange words, not only the shopkeeper, but also Zhang Sun was stunned. Blood transfusion, what does that mean? Ning Chen looked at their expressions and knew that there was probably no blood transfusion here. He didn't have time to explain to them, shopkeeper, please find something. He even told the shopkeeper what he was looking for. Ning Chen said it in a hurry, and the shopkeeper was also confused. In the end, it was Zhang Sun who understood the meaning and explained a few words. Only then did the shopkeeper walk out with a look of understanding. Fortunately, the shopkeeper's work efficiency was not bad. Not long after, the shopkeeper came back with several gold wires. They were of different thickness, but all had fine holes. This thing was not difficult to find in the gold jewelry shop. He didn't know which kind would be useful, so he bought all of them. Ning Chen took the thinnest one and used a pair of scissors to cut out the slanted ends. Then, after disinfecting it with wine, he inserted the gold wire into Qing Ning's wrist. On the side, Zhang Sun opened her mouth. Just as she was about to ask, she saw Ning Chen insert the other end of the gold wire into his wrist. Please don't make a mistake. Ning Chen's expression was very serious. In his previous life, he was O-type blood, but it didn't mean that it was the same in this life. If he made a mistake, there was really no way to save him. After a quarter of an hour, Ning Chen's face gradually turned pale, and his legs began to feel weak. However, he still tried to stand. There was no blood transfusion in this era. After he sat down, if he was not high enough, the blood would not be transfused. After another quarter of an hour, Ning Chen's mind suddenly turned black. He staggered and almost fell. Fortunately, Zhang Sun was beside him and supported him in time. You rest first. It's my turn. Zhang Sun looked at the pale Ning Chen and said with a trace of worry. No need. The less people there are, the less dangerous it is. I can still hold on. Ning Chen rejected Zhang Sun's good intentions. He was originally gambling. If Zhang Sun interfered, Qing Ning would really die. After nearly an hour, Ning Chen finally couldn't hold on anymore and fainted. In order to make it easier to take care of the two of them, Zhang Sun told the shopkeeper to add a temporary bed in the room and then put Ning Chen on it. The shopkeeper was in the front hall getting the medicine and boiling it, and then delivering it to the backyard. He was so busy that he didn't know where to start. Zhang Sun had specifically instructed him not to reveal her identity to anyone, so he didn't dare to let others do these things. He could only do it himself. After feeding the two of them medicine, Zhang Sun finally had time to sit down and think about the ins and outs of the whole thing. Very few people knew that she had left the palace. Why was the assassination so carefully arranged? The Western Palace. After thinking for a long time, Zhang Sun's eyes suddenly narrowed. She thought of the most likely person. Under the heavily guarded emperor, only imperial concubine one of the Western Palace could arrange everything in such a short time. If that was the case, then imperial concubine one might have been the one behind the assassination of Emperor Xia. But for what? Glory and wealth? Impossible. Power and status? The assassination attempt on her was still acceptable, but the death of Emperor Xia would only bring harm to her, with no benefit at all. Could it be that the assassination of her and Emperor Xia were not from the same faction? Zhang Sun thought for a long time but couldn't find the key point. However, she had an idea. She would slowly investigate it in the future. She had left the palace to return to the Zhang Sun residence. Emperor Xia had given her a secret order to bring a letter to the head of the Zhang Sun branch, Marquis Qinghe, her father. The Zhang Sun branch was not based in the imperial city, but in the distant northwest. They controlled Tailing, Qinghe, and Zhengchuan in the northwest. They could be said to be a feudal lord. However, in order to appease Emperor Xia, Marquis Qinghe had left most of his family members in the Zhang Sun residence in the imperial city. Now that the northern Meng imperial court was in chaos and Emperor Xia couldn't send out troops, the Zhang Sun branch was the best candidate. As long as Marquis Qinghe secretly sent more troops to the north, the northern Meng imperial court would have to think twice before sending out troops. Because of the bewilderment phenomenon, the great Xia couldn't initiate a war. However, it didn't mean that they had to swallow their anger. Emperor Xia couldn't send reinforcements openly, but he could send Marquis Qinghe secretly. The reason was simple. Marquis Qinghe's territory was close enough to the northern Meng imperial court. If he was careful, even if he sent reinforcements, it wouldn't attract attention. This matter was very confidential. Once it was exposed, it would be used by people with ulterior motives. They would spread rumors that Emperor Xia was going to start a war. With the appearance of the bewilderment phenomenon, the great Xia would be in a very difficult situation. In this world, the eternal night cult was the best at manipulating people. The great Xia couldn't take this risk. They had to be careful. Chapter 9. Zhang Sun knew very well that she would not be able to return to the Zhang Sun manor now. Since the assassin knew that she had left the palace, he would definitely be waiting for her on the way back. It was hard to believe that the power behind the assassin had infiltrated the imperial city and even the palace. The successive assassinations were more dangerous than the last. This time, if Qing Ning had not risked her life to protect her, she would not have been able to escape death. Ning Chen and Qing Ning had not woken up yet. Zhang Sun had always felt that Ning Chen was a very special child. She had this feeling from the first time she met him. It was said that it was lonely at the top. Ever since she became Empress Xia, she had experienced this feeling all the time. She did not even know when it started, but even her relatives had a hint of respect when facing her. Qing Ning had been brought up by her and was very close to her. It was because of this relationship that her attitude towards her was more respectful than close. If there were other feelings, perhaps it was more of gratitude. The first time she met Ning Chen, she had been watching a dignified young man running after something. Out of curiosity, she did not disturb him. Who knew that the young man would run into her arms? In the end, she found out that he was chasing a copper coin. From Ning Chen's eyes, she didn't see the kind of flattery, hypocrisy, or even fear that other people had when they saw her. Although there was a trace of guilt, it was obvious that he was a little embarrassed about bumping into her. And after she took his copper coins, this little fellow actually wanted to ask for them back. Later, she had Qing Ning bring Ning Chen to the Weiyang Palace. She knew that if this kind of child was anywhere else, he would definitely cause trouble. But what surprised her was that Ning Chen did not seem to appreciate her kindness. When they met again, she could still remember clearly how reluctant he was. What happened next was even more unexpected. Because of this, she had specially summoned Ning Chen to confirm the truth of the matter. She had seen countless people in her life. If it had been an old man who had lived for decades, perhaps he could have fooled her. But Ning Chen was just a 15 or 16-year-old boy. She could tell at a glance whether he was telling the truth or not. Originally, Antares was not a big deal. But for it to appear at such a delicate time was a big deal. Emperor Xia had already decided to send out his troops. The imperial astronomer knew that Antares was about to appear but chose to hide it. Their goal was even more chilling. Today, when she left the palace to return to Zhangsun Manor, Qing Ning actually dragged Ning Chen along. She was only surprised for a moment, but didn't ask anything. What really surprised her was Ning Chen's performance today. From the moment he pulled her and ran away to when he asked the shopkeeper for sulfur and saltpeter in the pharmacy to make something unknown. Later on, she asked the shopkeeper to go to the place where they were assassinated. Half of the street was bombed beyond recognition. When the soldiers arrived, they found a ground full of broken bones. Ning Chen's continuous and unexpected performance surprised her more and more. She even specifically asked the shopkeeper about the blood transfusion for Qing Ning, but the shopkeeper clearly said that he had never heard of blood transfusions being used to treat illnesses or injuries in this world. Even the medical books had no record of it. However, whether she believed it or not, Qing Ning's pulse was gradually stabilizing. It was obvious that she had passed the critical juncture. However, this time, Zhang Sun decided to keep the fact that Ning Chen had saved her a secret. She even downplayed Ning Chen's credit for reminding her about Yinghua. This was not a form of suppression, but a means of protection. After all, Ning Chen's foundation was too weak. If he suddenly made such a great contribution, it would be easy for others to be jealous and frame him. Presumably, the news of her assassination had already spread to the palace. Ning Chen took her and escaped into the crowd in the midst of the chaos, and then rescued Qing Ning. That was to say, no one knew of their whereabouts. She had once thought of having the shopkeeper go to the Zhangsun residence to report, but then she dispelled this idea. If it was noticed by someone with ulterior motives, it was likely that as soon as the shopkeeper arrived at the Zhangsun residence, someone would come to Duan Pharmacy. Actually, the best person to report to Zhangsun Manor was Ning Chen. Because he looked unfamiliar, unlike the shopkeeper, many people knew his identity as the shopkeeper of Duan Pharmacy. Even if someone noticed, they would not be able to guess where they were staying. Thirsty. At this moment, on the bed, Ning Chen's eyes were half open, and he called out in a daze. Hearing Ning Chen's voice, Zhang Sun came back to her senses. She went to the table and poured a cup of water. She walked to the bed and carefully helped Ning Chen up, and then brought the cup to his mouth. Ning Chen was in a daze. He did not know that the person in front of him was Zhang Sun, the one he was most afraid of. He raised his body slightly, drank a few mouthfuls of water, and then pushed the cup away, turned around, and went back to sleep. Zhang Sun smiled helplessly. This was the first time in her life that she had served someone like this. Even Emperor Xia did not have this blessing. On the other side, Qing Ning still showed no signs of waking up. After all, she was so badly injured that she would not wake up for a while. Fortunately, this was a pharmacy, and there were all kinds of herbs. As long as she was out of danger, she would recover sooner or later. Unknowingly, the sky turned dark, and night fell. Zhang Sun was worried about Antares. She walked to the window, quietly waiting for the moment to come. At the same time, in the heavenly mandate hall of Emperor Xia's palace, Emperor Xia stood alone in front of the hall, looking up at the sky. His dragon robe fluttered in the wind in the night, and the night was cold and dewy. However, no one dared to come forward and remind him. In the sky in the south, the Heart Imperial star was as bright as before. Antares was still as dim as last night, and there seemed to be no change. However, those who were observant found that the two were really close to each other. In the west of the Xia dynasty, in an unknown barren temple, a young man who looked so ordinary walked out. It was just an ordinary step, but no one knew how far he had walked. However, the moment the Taoist walked out of the temple, the originally barren area mysteriously disappeared, as if it had never been there. The world did not know that the temple that disappeared was the first temple of the Eternal Night sect, and they did not know that the young man who walked out was the divine son of the sect. Antares guarded the heart, and the mortal world was dark for 100 years. This was the sign of the Eternal Night sect. The same sign appeared in the Gu Meng Imperial Court in the north, the Du Yi Temple in the southwest, and the Tiansang Academy in the Great Xia. At this moment, the most shocking change occurred in the sky. The originally dim Antares suddenly brightened rapidly, and the two stars competed with each other, filling the sky with red. The will of the heavens. In the Duke of Grand Awareness's residence, the imperial tutor looked at the sky and sighed softly. The star of calamity was a sign that a great disaster was coming. This time, even the great Xia would not be able to avoid it. Grand Awareness, you're too much. Amidst the light laughter, a gorgeous figure walked over. She looked to be about 30 years old, and her face was like jade. It was one of the three dukes, Duke Shiyu. Good friend, you didn't come here so late just to mock the Grand Awareness, did you? The imperial tutor glanced at the former and said indifferently. I know that my good friend must be in a bad mood tonight, so I came to accompany you to soothe your mood, Duke Shiyu replied with a light laugh. Oh. Then I must thank you, Grand Awareness, the imperial tutor said. Oh, you're welcome, Duke Shiyu smiled. You're almost 100 years old, but you're still so shameless, the imperial tutor mocked. Well said, Duke Shiyu replied with a smile. That night, the world was in chaos. Everyone's attention was attracted by the two red stars in the sky. In the heavenly mandate palace, Emperor Xia felt waves of weakness wash over his body. Some observant people noticed that in the sky above Emperor Xia's palace, the unshakable true dragon's fate was rapidly weakening. The invincible Emperor Xia was finally no longer unbreakable. The divine prefecture was truly about to change. Fate was an indescribable trend. Back then, when the divine prefecture was divided and war broke out, the Emperor Xia came out of it and swept across the world. Hundreds of dynasties submitted to it and established imperial authority that would last for 1,000 years. Fate was like the sun in the sky. Even the Eternal Night cult, which had existed for tens of thousands of years, had no choice but to hide in the darkness. These 1,000 years were indeed the Great Xia's 1,000 years. However, the fate of the Great Xia was actually weakening. What did this mean? All the wise men in the world knew that this meant that the Great Xia was no longer invincible and unshakable. Fortunately, not many people in the world could see this point. After all, the number of people who could be called wise men could be counted on one hand. What beautiful stars! In the inner courtyard of Duan Pharmacy, just as Zhang Sun was frowning and thinking about a solution in the future, Ning Chen, who was supposed to be lying on the bed, was lying by the window after secretly checking on Qing Ning's condition. He was bored and wrapped in a quilt, lying by the window and looking at the stars leisurely. Zhang Sun was speechless. Only this guy could say something like this at this time. However, Zhang Sun had to admit that, putting aside the significance of Antares guarding the heart, the scene of the two stars competing and the blood-red sky was indeed very beautiful. Zhang Sun suddenly remembered that yesterday, Ning Chen had secretly climbed onto Qing Ning's roof to look at the stars and reminded her of Antares. This guy seemed to be very fond of looking at the stars. Ning Chen, do you like to look at the stars? Zhang Sun asked curiously since she had nothing to do. Yes, Ning Chen answered while counting the stars. You're not 16 years old yet, are you? Yes. Your home is not in the imperial city, is it? Yes. When I asked you yesterday, did you make up the master you mentioned? Yes. Ah, no. After saying this, Ning Chen finally reacted and turned to look at Zhang Sun. He was very annoyed. As expected, the older the ginger, the spicier it was. Compared to Zhang Sun, his little bit of experience wasn't enough to warm up. Zhang Sun glanced at the guilty Ning Chen and slowly said, since you saved this consort in Qing Ning today, this consort won't make a fuss about this matter. You've also made 2 great contributions. This consort can consider agreeing to a few of your requests. Any of them? Ning Chen's eyes lit up and he couldn't hide his excitement. How many do you want? Zhang Sun found it funny and asked. Ning Chen struggled internally and carefully reached out a hand. When he saw the dangerous look in Zhang Sun's eyes, he hurriedly pulled back 3 fingers. Is 2 okay? Say it, Zhang Sun nodded. I don't want to be a eunuch. I want to leave the palace. Ning Chen's eyes lit up. After brewing for so long, he finally had a chance to escape. Zhang Sun was stunned. She didn't think that Ning Chen's request would be this. After thinking about it for a while, she shook her head and said, no. Ning Chen was very anxious and jumped off the bed to argue, a gentleman's words cannot be taken back. Nyang Nyang, you're the empress. You can't go back on your words. Zhang Sun didn't get angry at Ning Chen's defiant questioning. She calmly replied, this consort is a woman, not a gentleman. Also, this consort only said that she would consider agreeing, not that she would definitely agree. Ning Chen was so angry that his face turned white and he couldn't say anything. He sat down on the bed with a thump and sulked to himself. This is invalid. You still have 1 more chance to make a request, Zhang Sun reminded. No more. Ning Chen's mood was very bad. He turned and crawled under the blankets to cover his head. There's no rush. If you remember anything, tell this consort again. Zhang Sun was in a good mood when she saw Ning Chen suffer. Woo-woo. 2 woo-woo sounds came from under the blankets. It sounded like a response, but it sounded more like a silent protest. Chapter 10. In the northern plains, under the starry night sky, a delicate woman stood quietly. Her beautiful face was sickly pale. As the night wind blew, she coughed lightly from time to time. Her delicate appearance made one's heart ache. Has Emperor Xia ordered the troops to be deployed? The woman asked softly. No. Beside the woman, an armored general respectfully replied. The general was very young. His gaze towards the woman was filled with admiration and reverence. It was not intense, but it could not be concealed. Heaven's will. The woman glanced at the 2 blood-red stars in the sky and coughed a few times. Soon after, she sighed softly. Someone has interfered in the end. It's a pity that a hidden chess piece has been set up for a long time. The young general did not say anything. He stood beside the woman. He knew that as long as the military advisor was here, the northern Meng royal court would eventually break through the Central Plains defense line. With Mars guarding the heart and the chi of true dragons unstable, Great Xia is the most seriously affected. Since Emperor Xia already knows his fate, he will definitely prioritize defending his position. If he wants to send reinforcements secretly, only Marquis Clear River in the northwest and Marquis Bai in the northeast can ask His Majesty to send reinforcements tomorrow morning. Fan Lingyue pondered for a moment before speaking. Why not the northeast? The general did not understand and asked. Marquis Bai has guarded the mountain gate for 16 years. Has he moved even once? Fan Lingyue asked in return. Never. Then he won't this time either. Fan Lingyue did not intend to explain further. Her eyes looked into the distance. There was a hint of tiredness in her calmness. From time to time, she coughed softly. Following which, the tiredness in her eyes became even stronger. If not for these simple words, who would have thought that this seemingly weak woman was actually the most terrifying military advisor in the Northern Meng royal court? 7 years ago, she was the one who single-handedly controlled the Northern Meng royal court's coup d'état, allowing the Northern Meng royal court to achieve unprecedented unity in the following 7 years. Unfortunately, the limited land and barren resources limited the Northern Meng royal court's continued development. This caused the Northern Meng royal court's development to slow down significantly in the past 2 years. Military advisor, the wind is cold at night. Let's go back. After waiting for a long time, the weather became colder and colder. The young general could not bear it and spoke. Fan Lingyue covered her mouth and coughed softly. She then turned around and walked towards the tent in the distance. In the inner courtyard of Duan Pharmacy, the morning sun shone into the room through the window and onto Ning Chen's face. Not far away, Qing Ning was still unconscious. Zhang Sun was guarding beside her. His clothes were untidy and he had fallen asleep in exhaustion. When Ning Chen woke up, he got out of bed and walked around. Other than the pain all over his body, everything else was all right. Zhang Sun still hadn't woken up. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and her tired look made Ning Chen's heart ache. He carefully covered her with a piece of clothing, and then gently pushed the door open and went out. The shopkeeper had been waiting outside for a long time. When he saw Ning Chen come out, his eyes lit up and he hurried over. Sir, the shopkeeper said. Just as he was about to ask Zhang Sun if he had any arrangements, he saw a series of intense reactions. You are the father-in-law, your entire family is a father-in-law. Ning Chen immediately interrupted the shopkeeper's words as if someone had stepped on his tail. Pay, what bad luck. Then how should I address you? Oh, no, how should I address you? Shocked by Ning Chen's intense reaction, the shopkeeper asked cautiously. Ning Chen. Oh, then may I ask Brother Ning, does the Empress have any orders? The Empress hasn't woken up yet, so how would I know? Ning Chen replied gloomily. He also wanted to know. Mercilessly pushing the shopkeeper to the side, Ning Chen walked into the courtyard and began practicing taiji, causing the shopkeeper behind him to stare blankly. Brother Ning is truly a strange person. Undeserved reputation. Brother Ning is too modest. Well said. Ning Chen, come here. Not going. After saying this, Ning Chen felt that something was off. When he turned around and saw that it was Zhang Sun who was calling him, he immediately broke out in cold sweat. He stopped practicing and ran over. Empress, what orders do you have? Return to the room, I have something to tell you. Zhang Sun didn't care about Ning Chen's lack of manners. She knew that if she did, she would die from anger sooner or later. After entering the room, Zhang Sun looked at Ning Chen with an unprecedentedly serious expression. Ning Chen, I have something to tell you. Seeing Zhang Sun's expression, Ning Chen's heart skipped a beat. He understood that there was something troublesome for him to do. Think of a way to enter the Zhang Sun estate. Once you see the Marquis of Taiping, tell him that this consort is here. Remember, you have to see the Marquis of Taiping, no one else is allowed. This was an important matter, so Zhang Sun couldn't help but have misgivings. She couldn't guarantee that there weren't any spies in the Zhang Sun estate, so she could only be extremely careful. The Marquis of Taiping was her older brother and also the leader of Zhang Sun's branch in the imperial city. He definitely knew that something had happened to her by now and was searching everywhere for her. If there's a chance, run. Hearing Zhang Suan's orders, Ning Chen's first reaction was to take the opportunity to leave. However, when he saw the still unconscious Qing Ning and Zhang Suan's trusting gazes, he immediately felt a bit embarrassed. I'll try my best. Ning Chen felt conflicted and replied vaguely. Zhang Sun frowned. She was clearly very dissatisfied with this answer. Ning Chen sighed inwardly and didn't delay any longer. He raised his head to look at Zhang Sun and said seriously, "Don't worry, Empress. As long as I'm still alive, I'll definitely deliver the message." Hearing Ning Chen's promise, Zhang Sun finally relaxed and her expression softened slightly. She took out a crescent-shaped jade pendant from her waist and handed it to Ning Chen. "Take this. Once the Marquis of Taiping sees it, he'll believe you." After taking the jade pendant, Ning Chen suddenly said without any warning, "Empress, if I don't return before sunset, take Qing Ning and go somewhere else." Zhang Sun froze, confusion filling her eyes. She didn't understand. Ning Chen cracked a smile and said, "I'm scared that if I get caught, I won't be able to withstand the torture and will give you up." "Ha!" Zhang Sun laughed involuntarily, then replied, "It's fine. This consort doesn't expect you to be able to withstand any torture. If it really gets to that point, don't worry about anything else. Just think of a way to protect your little life. Bye-bye." Ning Chen waved, then turned to leave, leaving behind Zhang Sun who was completely confused. She didn't understand what he meant by those last two words. After a long time, Zhang Sun helplessly shook her head and sighed, "This little guy is too hard to understand." The Grand Xia's imperial city was very large and bustling. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was the #1 city under the heavens. Ning Chen walked around until he was dizzy. He only knew the general direction of the Zhang Sun residence, so he asked as he walked. After walking around for half a day, it was already close to noon. At this time, Ning Chen suddenly realized a terrifying fact: he actually had no money. His only copper coin had been confiscated by Zhang Sun, so he really was penniless. "Older sister, how do I get to the Zhang Sun residence?" After asking around, Ning Chen's throat was so thirsty that it was almost smoking. Seeing a woman walk past him, he subconsciously stopped her and asked. "Hee, asking around even led you to a brothel. Young master is truly in a good mood." Yuhani glanced at the youth in front of her and giggled. "Young master seems to be thirsty. Come in and have a cup of tea." This isn't good." Ning Chen hesitated for a moment before following the woman into the Lingyan pavilion. So what if it was a brothel? So what? Couldn't he just ask for a cup of water? "Young master, please have a cup." Yuhani poured a cup of tea and placed it in front of Ning Chen. "It's free, right?" Ning Chen looked at the luxurious decorations around him and probed. "Young master must be joking. It's just a cup of tea." Yuhani sweetly smiled. Ning Chen's smile blossomed. He took the cup of tea and drank it in one gulp. "Refreshing. Do you want more?" Yuhani poured another cup of tea and handed it over. "Older sister, you really are a good person." Ning Chen took the cup and bashfully smiled. He hadn't even drunk the tea yet, but he was already flattering her. "This cup is for money." Pooh! Ning Chen had just taken half a mouthful of water when he heard the former's words and immediately spat it out. Cough, cough. Ning Chen looked at Yuhani, his face red from choking. Hee, I'm just teasing you. Look at how scared you are." Yuhani laughed, gasping for breath. "Ah." Ning Chen awkwardly wiped his mouth. His gaze randomly swept around, not daring to look directly at Yuhani. How come there's no one here?" Ning Chen realized that the luxurious pavilion was completely empty. There wasn't a single guest. He looked at Yuhani again. She had willowy eyebrows and phoenix eyes. Her skin was like jade, and she looked like a femme fatale. No matter how he looked at her, she didn't look like someone who would be unwanted. Don't think too much. Yuhani looked at Ning Chen's strange expression. How could she not know what he was thinking? She angrily said, "This Ling Yan pavilion is opened by me." Hearing that, Ning Chen looked at the woman in front of him with astonishment. The shy smile that often hung on his face disappeared and was replaced by a trace of disgust. If one didn't pay close attention, it would have been difficult to notice. "Sorry to bother you, but I'll bring the money for the tea tomorrow." Gently putting down the cup, Ning Chen indifferently said a few words before turning and walking out. "This young master has come. Why haven't you girls come down yet?" Right at this moment, a young figure swaggered in from outside the ascending mist pavilion. Dressed in gorgeous silk and satin, coupled with that arrogant and despotic appearance, it was obvious with a single glance that he was a profligate son of a wealthy family. "Oh, it's young Master Zhang Sun. What wind blew you here?" In just a short while, a few ladies dressed in light muslin walked down from the second floor. Their beautiful bodies were faintly discernible, making people feel thirsty just by looking at them. There's been too much trouble in the residence these past 2 days. It's almost driving me crazy, so I came out to have some fun. Zhang Sun Yunxian laughed as if there was no one present. To the side, Ning Chen stopped and looked back at the young man not far away. After a moment, he walked forward. "You're from the Zhang Sun residence?" "Yes." Zhang Sun Yunxian was stunned and subconsciously replied. "Taiping Marquis' son." "Yes, what's wrong?" Zhang Sun Yunxuan's face showed impatience and displeasure. "Oh, what a coincidence." Ning Chen coldly laughed and immediately kicked the former's abdomen. In front of everyone's eyes, Zhang Sun Yunxian crashed into the table with a bang, spilling tea all over the floor. At this moment, not only were the women who had just come down stunned, but even Yuhani, who was closest to them, couldn't react. You're courting death. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is?" Zhang Sun Yunxian was so angry that his brain couldn't function properly after being kicked. He struggled to get up. "I know, your father is Taiping Marquis." "You just said it." Ning Chen coldly snorted. It turned out that relying on one's father was so popular at this time. Zhang Sun was suffering outside and had almost lost his life, but this guy was still in the mood to go to a brothel. He really was a cruel and unscrupulous thing. He took a step forward and kicked Zhang Sun Yunxian again. Zhang Sun Yunxian, who had not yet regained his footing, was sent flying again. He crashed into the table and chairs, shattering the cups and plates on the floor. "This kick is to punish you for being heartless." Ning Chen once again walked forward and looked at Zhang Sun Yunxian on the ground. He picked him up and ruthlessly kicked him again. "This kick is to punish you for being shameless." Teacups spilled all over the floor, tables and chairs all over the floor. Ning Chen's expression became colder and colder. He picked Zhang Sun Yunxian up and then kicked him again. "This kick is to punish you for ruining the sound of the door." Grabbing Zhang Sun Yunxian, Ning Chen cut his finger as if he didn't notice. His icy gaze was bone-chilling. "This final kick is to let you remember that when we meet again in the future, don't humiliate Zhang Sun Ming." With a bang, tables and chairs were smashed. Broken pieces of wood and blood covered the ground. Everyone was so shocked that they couldn't say a word. The atmosphere instantly turned cold. Several women looked at Ning Chen with a trace of fear and unconsciously took a step back. "Sister, can I borrow some brush and ink?" Ning Chen walked in front of a woman and smiled brightly. Yes. The woman took another step back in fright. She hastily nodded and then ran up the stairs. Not long after, she timidly walked over with ink and carefully handed it to Ning Chen. "Thank you." Ning Chen took the brush and ink and smiled even more brightly. If it weren't for the previous scene, who would have thought that this seemingly harmless youth was actually a living devil? Chapter 11. Zhang Sun Yunxian half fainted from the pain, curled up on the ground and kept trembling. Ning Chen stepped forward and immediately thought of something. He looked sideways at the woman who gave him the ink and said, "Sister, the ink won't be washed off, right?" The woman's delicate body trembled subconsciously, and she said with fear, "No, this is Qian Nian ink." Hearing this, Ning Chen's eyes lit up, and his smile made people shudder. Not far away, Yuhani frowned, but she did not intervene. The boy in front of her knew Zhang Sun Yunxuan's identity and still dared to be so unscrupulous. Either there was something wrong with his head, or his background was amazing. There was one more thing, she still did not understand why there was a flash of disgust in the former's eyes. Was it directed at her or Ling Yan Pavilion? All kinds of doubts made Yuhani choose to stay out of the matter for the time being. As long as no one died here, the storm would not involve Ling Yan Pavilion. Ning Chen squatted down with his back to them. A moment later, two crooked words appeared on Zhang Sun Yunxuan's face. Looking carefully, one could barely recognize the words Zhang Sun. Then, Ning Chen silently took out the moon-shaped jade pendant given to him by Zhang Sun, dipped it in ink, and fiercely imprinted it on the boy's forehead. Why haven't the government and Zhang Sun mansion people arrived yet? After doing all this, Ning Chen looked outside. Except for more and more people at the door, there was not a single shadow of the soldiers. He could not help but complain about the efficiency of the government. The young Marquis of Zhangsun Mansion was beaten. This news must have spread. It would not be long before the people of Zhangsun Mansion and the government arrived. May I ask young master's identity? At this time, Yuhani came forward and asked politely. No time. Ning Chen coldly glanced at the former. He really did not want to suppress the disgust rising in his heart, so he said in a bad tone. Prostitutes should not be blamed. The ones who should be blamed were these beautiful but ruthless brothels and schools. Yuhani's breathing stagnated, and her face changed again and again. However, the situation was unclear, so she could only suppress her anger and said calmly, I don't know how Yuhani offended young master. Please tell me. Facing Yuhani's question, Ning Chen did not even have the interest to answer. He turned to the woman who gave him the ink and brush, and handed it back. He grinned and said, Thank you, sister. No need to thank me. The woman took the brush and ink fearfully and said nervously. The woman's fear made Ning Chen feel helpless. Wasn't he a little too violent before? Ning Chen's self-doubt only flashed for a moment before it disappeared without a trace. Cough, it wasn't his fault. It was Zhang Sun Yunxuan's bad luck that was too disappointing. He picked up a chair and sat down in an ostentatious manner. Then, he poured himself a cup of tea and drank it as if there was no one else around. It had only been a short while and he was already thirsty. It seemed that beating people up was a tough thing to do. Yu Han-yi and the other women looked at this master and didn't know how to deal with him. They could only wait for the government to deal with him. Out of the way, out of the way. It didn't take long for the people from the government to arrive. When the leader saw Zhang Sun Yunxian, who had fainted from the beating, he felt a headache coming on. This was the only son of Marquis Taiping and the nephew of Empress Zhangsun. How could he be beaten up like this? Looking at the sir, who was sitting at the side as if nothing had happened, the officers felt that they were in a mess. Take him away. The leader of the officers gritted his teeth and shouted. They couldn't care so much now. They could only take one step at a time. If this person was really someone with a great background, there would be people above him. When Ning Chen saw that the officers had finally come, it was as if he had seen his relatives. He didn't need anyone to grab him and he stood up to greet them. The people who were already in a mess suddenly felt that their brains weren't enough. Not long after they arrived at the government, the people from Zhangsun Mansion arrived and took Zhang Sun Yunxian away. Ning Chen was naturally thrown into the prison to wait for his punishment. It was the first time in Ning Chen's life that he was in prison. Because he knew that he would be out soon, he didn't have any worries in his heart. Bored, Ning Chen sat in the prison and used a small wooden stick to draw a chessboard on the ground. He played chess with himself. At first, he played quickly, but gradually, there were more and more chess pieces on the chessboard. Every move slowed down. A dead end gradually appeared and it was difficult to move forward. Life was like a game of chess. It was about layout and breaking the game. No matter how slow Ning Chen's mind was, he understood that he had accidentally broken into someone else's game. If he couldn't break through, he would be trapped in the dead end. Ning Chen frowned more and more. He looked at the chessboard and thought about every move. Why would someone be so eager to assassinate Zhang Sun? If something happened to Zhang Sun, who would benefit? He had been in this world for too short a time and didn't know many things. But everything was connected. Zhang Sun and Qing Ning's abnormal reactions last night and Zhang Suan's rush to leave the palace early in the morning. It was obvious that the assassination of Zhang Sun had something to do with the Antares guarding the heart. The Antares guarding the heart symbolized war. He didn't care about it at first because it wasn't a big deal at all. This thing would come once every 15 years or so. Sometimes it was obvious, sometimes it was weak. If the foundation of Xia Kingdom was shaken because of this, then the 1,000-year dynasty would have been destroyed many times over. If so, why would Zhang Sun have such a big reaction? Ning Chen sighed softly and threw away the wooden stick in his hand. If he guessed correctly, Zhang Sun most likely came out with a secret order from Emperor Xia, and it was a secret order that couldn't be known to the world. It was related to the Antares guarding the heart, and it couldn't be known to the world. The result couldn't be more obvious. Emperor Xia was going to mobilize the army, and it was the army of Zhang Sun. Then it made sense that Zhang Sun had been assassinated. Someone had guessed Emperor Xia's intention and even guessed the time when Zhang Sun left the palace. They wanted to use the assassination of Zhang Sun to create a rift between Zhang Sun and Emperor Xia, and delay the time to mobilize the army. Thinking of this, Ning Chen couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. If everything was true, then the scheming of the person who set this up was too scary. He could see so much because everything had already happened. There were all kinds of signs, so it was much easier to speculate. But the person who set this up had predicted all the things that hadn't happened and played into the game. The calculation involved was not something an ordinary person could do. Unfortunately, he was dragged into the game by Qing Ning and couldn't escape even if he wanted to. If possible, Ning Chen didn't want to face such a scheming person. If he wasn't careful, he would die without knowing why, and he wouldn't even have a chance to struggle. The only thing he could do now was to save Zhang Sun first and then carefully deal with the person behind this. Fortunately, the game wasn't targeted at him. As a bystander, as long as he didn't carelessly enter the game, he wouldn't be as embarrassed as he was today. It's about time. Ning Chen stood up and looked at the door of the cell. It should be about time. Within the Zhang Sun residence, Marquis Taiping's study, Zhang Sun Yunxian knelt on the ground in fear. A middle-aged man with a cold expression stood in front of the desk. The veins on his clenched fists popped out, showing just how furious he was. Bastard! Marquis Taiping slammed the desk. In his fury, he grabbed the inkstone on the desk and threw it out. Bang! The inkstone struck Zhang Sun Yunxuan's forehead, causing blood to splatter. To the side, a beautiful middle-aged woman went up and hugged her son with a pained expression. She glared at Marquis Taiping. Marquis, your son has been beaten. It's fine if you don't stand up for him, but do you want to beat him to death? Shut up. Marquis Taiping's fury soared. The air around him trembled, and he pressed down on the desk with his hand, causing it to shatter. I don't hit women, but that's not a reason for you to be so impudent. Scram! With that, Marquis Taiping waved his sleeve, sending her out of the study. With a bang, the door closed. Only Marquis Taiping and the kneeling Zhang Sun Yunxian were left in the room. At this moment, Zhang Sun Yunxian was trembling even more violently. Do you know what happened to your aunt? Asked Marquis Taiping coldly. I do. Zhang Sun Yunxian lowered his head and trembled. The entire residence is looking for your aunt. Do you know? Marquis Taiping's voice was even colder. I know. Good, very good. Hearing this, Marquis Taiping could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He took a step forward and slapped Zhang Sun Yunxian in the face. With a bang, Zhang Sun Yunxian was sent flying 5 steps away until he crashed into the screen. Marquis Taiping's slap was merciless. He could tolerate anything, but this was the only thing he could not tolerate. Zhang Sun Yunxian landed on the ground and vomited a mouthful of blood. He trembled, not even daring to cry out in pain. Reflect on your actions in the study. Without my orders, you are not allowed to take half a step out. With that, Marquis Taiping walked outside. When he saw the angry woman at the door, his eyes turned even colder. If you dare to let him out without permission, or if he takes half a step out of this room himself, you know the consequences. The Zhangsun estate is not a place that can tolerate just anyone, not even my wife and son. The woman trembled with anger, but she did not dare to say anything else. She knew that Marquis Taiping would definitely do what he said. An hour later, the door to the prison creaked open. The two people's eyes met for the first time. Marquis Taiping and Ning Chen, two people who should not have interacted with each other, stood facing each other. No one could see any emotion in their calm gazes. What's your name? Asked Marquis Taiping after some time. Ning Chen. A young hero, praised Marquis Taiping, not hiding the admiration in his voice. Lord Marquis is too kind, replied Ning Chen modestly. What a pity. Marquis Taiping suddenly sighed. Although one did not ask where a hero came from, in truth, where they came from determined how high a hero was. Ah! Ning Chen was not moved. He knew what Marquis Taiping meant by, what a pity, but that was not important to him. Is the Empress okay? Marquis Taiping walked up and asked seriously. She's fine, replied Ning Chen. Let's go. Take me to see the Empress, said Marquis Taiping. Just you? This time, it was Ning Chen's turn to be shocked. Ah! Marquis Taiping smiled and replied, I alone am enough. These simple words did not have any fluctuations in them. They were so calm that it made one feel like he was just stating a normal fact. As one of the 10 strongest marquises in Great Xia, the word Taiping was more important than Mount Tai. The Zhangsun bloodline, 1 family and 2 marquises, not only symbolized the grace of the imperial family, but also their strength that made people look up to them. In the study room of the Zhangsun manor, Zhangsun Yunxian struggled to get up. On his blood-stained face, the word Zhangsun could still be seen clearly. In the next moment, intense coughing sounded out. It was heart-wrenching, and the hair above his eyebrows flew up. It was like a crescent moon mark had appeared. It was as black as ink and unusually eye-catching. Chapter 12. In the inner courtyard of Duan Pharmacy, Zhang Sun sat by the bed and looked at Qing Ning, who still hadn't woken up. A faint sadness flashed across her beautiful face. Qing Ning was raised by her and was the only person she could talk to after entering the palace. The most heartless of all was the imperial family. The palace was filled with schemes and schemes. She had long been exhausted. Because of this, Qing Ning, who hadn't even reached 20 years of age, silently helped her shoulder all the matters in Weiyang Palace. 7 years was like one. Knock knock. Outside the room, there was a knock on the door. Zhang Sun came back to her senses and said softly, the door isn't locked. Come in. Empress, I'm back. A familiar voice rang out. Zhang Sun turned around and ignored Ning Chen's smug smile. Instead, she looked at Marquis Taiping. Big brother. Zhang Sun was stunned, and a rare wisp of excitement flashed through his eyes as he spoke. Wuyo, it's been hard on you. Marquis Taiping sighed softly as he looked at his younger sister who was still beautiful but had aged. On the side, Ning Chen's smile was very bright. He did his best to open his eyes wide. See, this is all my work. Praise me, hurry up and praise me. Unfortunately, Zhang Sun was very excited and forgot about this hero. Marquis Taiping didn't have any intention of paying attention to Ning Chen, so this hero was mercilessly forgotten to the side. Ning Chen. Fortunately, Zhang Sun wasn't an ordinary person. After a short moment of excitement, she quickly calmed down and glanced at Ning Chen. Ha! Ning Chen's face lit up. He finally remembered this hero and quickly stood up straight. His meaning was, praise me, I'm listening. Go out for a moment. I have something to say to Marquis Taiping. Ning Chen ran out with tears in his eyes. His heart was broken like tofu. This child is not bad. Marquis Taiping weighed the pros and cons and finally decided to remind Zhang Sun. He was quick-witted and daring, but he didn't lose his composure. He was a good seedling. If he was nurtured well, he would definitely become someone who could hold his own. Zhang Sun glanced at Marquis Taiping in surprise. There weren't many people who could receive such praise from his big brother. They could be counted on one hand. Marquis Taiping briefly recounted what had happened today. Hearing this, Zhang Sun nodded inwardly. Marquis Taiping's quick wit was indeed extraordinary. While praising him, he could not help but lament his nephew's incompetence. Yunxian is still young. It's okay to punish him, but don't hurt the relationship between father and son. For some reason, Zhang Sun deliberately stopped talking about Ning Chen and changed the topic. The Marquis of Taiping nodded and said, I have my own plans on this matter. Wuyo, why did you leave the palace this time? You actually allowed yourself to fall into such great danger. This is not in line with your usual rigorous style of doing things. We have no other choice. Zhang Sun sighed softly. You must know that the northern border is in danger. The northern Meng royal court is no longer what it used to be. Emperor Xia's wish to send troops is hindered by the will of heaven. Now, only my father, who is in charge of the northwest, can secretly send reinforcements. Although I heard about it, I did not expect the northern Meng royal court to become such a huge problem. The Marquis of Taiping's heart was heavy. The barbarian land of the past had now become a thorn in the back of Great Xia. It was truly unexpected. Most of the officials in the court still have the impression of the northern Meng royal court from 10 years ago, so they do not care much about it. Unfortunately, the will of heaven plays tricks on people. It was not easy for Emperor Xia to go against the opinions of the masses and decide to send troops, but it was suddenly disrupted. Zhang Suan's heart was abnormally heavy. If they missed this opportunity, who knew what kind of price Great Xia would have to pay? But without a doubt, this price would be unbearable. The northern Meng royal court had been building up their troops in recent years, and their intentions were clear. The soldiers of Great Xia at the northern border were no longer enough to defend against the northern Meng cavalry. The matter of sending troops could not be delayed. In the end, the existence of the Eternal Night Cult is the greatest source of calamity. This organization that has existed for thousands of years controls the faith of the world. Its influence is truly terrifying. The Marquis of Taiping was not a mediocre person. Naturally, he could guess the reason why Emperor Xia did not send troops. Although Great Xia was strong, it was not strong enough to be the enemy of the entire world. Sending troops now would give the Eternal Night Cult the best excuse to push the world to attack Great Xia. The most terrifying thing was that this was probably just the beginning. The existence of the Northern Meng Imperial Court and the Eternal Night Cult had tied up too much of Great Xia's energy, and they had no time to care about other things. Some of the forces that had submitted to Great Xia in the past might very well surface one by one. Great Xia, who had sat in the Central Plains for thousands of years, had been invincible for too long. Without a doubt, they had become the target of everyone. Those who were tempted to make a move were just waiting for an opportunity. The Central Plains were prosperous and rich, and it was like a piece of fat meat that everyone wanted to take a bite out of. Now that Great Xia had a strong military deterrence, no one dared to be the first to take a bite out of it. However, if the world attacked Great Xia, these hidden powers would definitely reveal their fangs. Wuyo, I'll send you back to the palace first. Time was of the essence, and Marquis Taiping made a prompt decision. The earlier he sent reinforcements to the north, the earlier Great Xia's crisis would be resolved. There was not much time left, and there was no room for hesitation. An hour later, the carriage was already waiting in the courtyard. As the coolie, Ning Chen was naturally in charge of carrying Qing Ning into the carriage. Shopkeeper uncle, don't forget to return the money for the tea at the Lingyan Pavilion tomorrow. Once I get my salary, I'll return it to you. Before leaving, Ning Chen was still unwilling to leave. After nagging for a while, he noticed that Zhang Xuan's expression was not right. Only then did he reluctantly follow Zhang Sun back to the palace. By the time Zhang Sun and Ning Chen returned to the palace, the sky was already as dark as it could get. Since it was inconvenient for Marquis Taiping to enter the palace, he left after sending Zhang Sun to the palace gates. What's going on? After entering the palace, Zhang Sun and Ning Chen both noticed that the atmosphere in the palace was not right. The guards were running around, as if something big had happened. What happened? Zhang Sun asked Ning Chen to stop one of the guards. Reporting to the Empress, someone has barged into the imperial study. His Majesty is furious and has ordered a search of the entire palace, the guard respectfully replied. Hearing this, Ning Chen was shocked and extremely anxious. Ning Chen, take Qing Ning back first. I need to go to the Heavenly Mandate Palace, Zhang Sun ordered as she got off the carriage. Yes. Ning Chen lowered his head to avoid Zhang Sun's attention. A trace of worry flashed through his eyes. That silly woman, don't do anything stupid. After Zhang Sun left, Ning Chen hurriedly took Qing Ning back to Weiyang Palace. Because he was in a hurry, he did not even hear the soft moans from the carriage. After returning to Weiyang Palace, Ning Chen carried Qing Ning back to her room and rushed back to his room without stopping. However, he did not notice that behind him, a pair of bright eyes quietly opened. She looked at his back thoughtfully without saying anything. Mu Qingxue. Opening the door, the first thing he saw was that beautiful figure lying on the bed with her clothes stained with blood. Ning Chen was shocked. He quickly closed the door and carried the former to the bed. Seeing that Mu Qingxue's right shoulder was stained with blood and half of her clothes was bleeding, Ning Chen could not care less about the difference between men and women. He tore open the clothes on his shoulder and saw that there was a sword wound on his right shoulder. Other than that, there was no other wound. Ning Chen was anxious and his heart was even more anxious. This sword wound was obviously not fatal. Mu Qingxue was seriously injured and unconscious. However, he did not know medicine and did not know what the real injury was. Medicine, yes, medicine. Ning Chen remembered the life-saving medicine that Mu Qingxue had given him. At this moment, he could only hope that she had left him one. Gritting his teeth, he did not care about anything else and started to search her body. No. At this moment, Ning Chen's face was pale. He did not know what to do. What to do, Ning Chen felt so powerless for the first time. I must find a way to get out of the palace. After thinking for a while, Ning Chen made up his mind. Without hesitation, he picked up Mu Qingxue and walked out. Fortunately, he drove a carriage back, so it was a good cover. When he entered the palace earlier, many of the imperial guards had seen him. Perhaps it was the best time to go out now. He did not know what would happen if he left, but if he did not leave now, Mu Qingxue would definitely die. He was not a noble person, but he was not a coward either. He promised Mu Qingxue that he would take her out, so he must do it. Bang! At this moment, the door to the room was opened with a bang. Ning Chen's footsteps paused as his body suddenly trembled. Sister Qing Ning. Seeing the familiar figure in front of him, Ning Chen let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it was not an imperial guard. However, in the next moment, his body tensed up again. He almost forgot that Qing Ning was the most loyal person to Zhang Sun. Compared to the imperial guards, she was more dangerous. Why are you here? Ning Chen thought for a while and did not feel that he had exposed himself. Moreover, Qing Ning had been unconscious the whole time, so it was impossible for her to notice anything. You are not a careless person. How could you not notice that I have woken up? The only explanation is that you have something on your mind. Qing Ning's face was still pale. She blocked the door and said coldly. Is she the assassin who entered the palace? Ning Chen, you have really disappointed me. Qing Ning glanced at the woman in Ning Chen's arms. Her eyes gradually turned cold. She did not expect that the assassin that the imperial guards could not find was actually hiding in Wei Yang Palace. She was too careless. Ning Chen sighed deeply. He knew that it was useless to explain further. He took 2 steps back and pulled the rope beside the bed. Immediately, the door closed with a bang and a rope net fell down silently. Qing Ning felt that something was wrong and wanted to dodge. However, she felt that her chest was blocked and her breathing was not smooth. Her steps slowed down and she was caught by the rope net. Ning Chen did not expect that the trap he set would be used on Qing Ning one day. Fortunately, Qing Ning had just woken up and even moving was difficult for her. Otherwise, this small trap would be useless. Sister Qing Ning, I am sorry. Ning Chen put Mu Qingxue down and immediately walked forward to tie Qing Ning's hands and feet and sealed her mouth. Then, he untied the rope net and carried her to the bed. Sister Qing Ning, whether you believe me or not, I have never thought of harming you and the Empress. I met Mu Qingxue by chance that night when I entered the palace. She helped me, so I must save her. This is what I promised her. I will not break my promise. Ning Chen covered Qing Ning with a thin blanket and talked endlessly. He knew that after he left, they might never have the chance to meet again. He had only been in this world for a few days. Qing Ning was the person who treated him the best. He did not want to hide anything from her, but he also did not want to lie. After doing all this, Ning Chen carried Mu Qingxue and walked out. Before he left, he looked back one last time. As his eyes met, he smiled brightly and said, Finally, I have something to say, but I did not dare to say it. Sister Qing Ning, you are so fierce. Let's see who will want you in the future. The door closed and Ning Chen left. On the bed, Qing Ning stared at the door. Her tense body slowly relaxed. She did not know if what she did was right or wrong. However, she knew that she did not regret it. Not today, not in the future. He was still so stupid. Why didn't he think about how she could be trapped by such a simple rope net? She did not avoid it, but it did not mean that she could not break free. Fortunately, he was still so stupid. Chapter 13. Outside the Weiyang Palace, it was brightly lit. Groups of imperial guards were patrolling the palace. It was a spectacular sight. Ning Chen led the carriage out. As soon as he left the Weiyang Palace, he stopped. Seeing a group of imperial guards passing by, he took the initiative to stop them. Little eunuch, what's the matter? Because Ning Chen walked out of the Weiyang Palace, the imperial guard at the front didn't dare to neglect him. He asked politely. The Empress asked me to leave the palace to do something urgent. But now the palace is under lockdown. It's very inconvenient to go in and out. I'm afraid I'll delay the task given by the Empress. I hope you can send me off. Ning Chen's eyes swept across the passing imperial guards. Anxiety flashed across his face. Soon after, he retracted his gaze and looked at the imperial guard general in front of him. The imperial guard was in a difficult position. He hesitated for a moment. The assassin broke into the imperial study at night. They were ordered to patrol. Logically speaking, they couldn't leave their post without permission. However, the Empress's matter couldn't be delayed. If he refused, it would inevitably make the owner of the Weiyang Palace unhappy. If you don't believe me, this is the token given by the Empress. You can take it and confirm it with the Empress. While speaking, Ning Chen looked more anxious. He took out the moon-shaped jade pendant given by Zhang Sun and handed it to the Imperial Guard. He urged the Imperial Guard. Okay, I'll send you off. When the Imperial Guard saw the moon-shaped jade pendant, the last trace of hesitation in his heart disappeared. He nodded and agreed. This was the token of the Empress. Many Imperial Guards in the palace had seen it before. It couldn't be wrong. Ning Chen was relieved. He chose to stop the Imperial Guards in front of the Weiyang Palace to lower their guard against him. No matter how cautious a person was, there would be cognitive blind spots. As long as he used it carefully and guided it, he could create an illusion that it was difficult for people to distinguish. Little eunuch, you look young. You just entered the palace not long ago, right? The Imperial Guard ordered the rest behind him to continue patrolling. Then he stepped forward to help lead the carriage. He asked casually as he walked. Yes. Ning Chen nodded a little embarrassedly and answered, I just entered the palace a few days ago. Thanks to Miss Qing Ning's care, I'm doing some chores in the Weiyang Palace now. Little eunuch, you're so lucky. Everyone in the palace knows that the Empress is virtuous and kind. She is the most generous to the servants. The Imperial Guard smiled kindly and said. General is right. Ning Chen replied with a smile, but he disagreed in his heart. These fools had all been deceived by Zhang Sun. He did not know if she was virtuous or not, but she was not generous to her subordinates at all. He had been deceived by Zhang Sun several times. Otherwise, he would have been enjoying himself outside the palace and would not have had to run away in the middle of the night. Oh, isn't this little Ningxi? Where are you going so late at night? They hadn't walked for long when suddenly, a voice that sounded like a male duck's throat sounded out from not too far away from them, and Ning Chen's heart instantly jerked as he cried out in his heart. Looking in the direction of the voice, a figure wearing a sapphire blue robe embroidered with cranes, holding a horsetail whisk, and wearing a peacock feather hat inlaid with gemstones slowly walked over. He looked at Ning Chen and smiled ambiguously. What a coincidence! Eunuch Zhao Jin. The leader of the guards recognized the person who had come. He politely cupped his hands in greeting. General Ling, Zhao Jin returned the greeting, then asked with a smile, where are you and little Ning going? Little eunuch Xiao is going out of the palace on the orders of Her Majesty the Empress. I just happened to send him off. Does eunuch Xiao know this little eunuch Xiao? Ling Xiao was slightly surprised. Zhao Jin had served by Emperor Xiao's side for more than 20 years, and his status was not ordinary. How could he know a little eunuch who had just entered the palace? We've only met once. Zhao Jin gave a perfunctory reply and didn't explain much. Then he looked at Ning Chen who was beside Ling Xiao and smiled sinisterly. He said with a hidden meaning, Little Ning, I originally wanted to transfer you to work by my side, but I didn't expect Her Majesty the Empress to take you to Weiyang Palace first. What a pity. Ha! Ning Chen laughed foolishly to cover it up, and tactfully didn't explain much. No matter what he said, he would offend people. You'd better go fight with Zhang Sun yourself. Zhao Jin walked around the carriage and said with a fake smile, the palace is in a bit of a mess right now. General, you have to check carefully so that you don't lose anything. Ning Chen's heart sank, and his expression changed slightly. This damned old pervert. Ling Xiao looked at Ning Chen awkwardly. It was not good for them to ask about Weiyang Palace's affairs, but eunuch Zhao had already reminded him. If he still didn't check, it would be somewhat unreasonable. General Ling, do things according to the rules. However, please be careful. Ning Chen said in a low voice. Ling Xiao nodded and stepped forward to lift the curtain. Then he boarded the carriage and prepared to check. The carriage was filled with boxes, one on top of another. Ling Xiao opened the outermost box, and what entered his eyes were pieces of porcelain. He moved them away and put them to one side. When he opened another box, it was still filled with porcelain. Ling Xiao had been in the palace for nearly 10 years and recognized that these were all commonly used items in the palace. They were exquisite, but in terms of value, they could only be said to be so. There were so many treasures in Weiyang Palace. Any one of them was not something this carriage of porcelain could compare to. If it was stolen, the gains would not make up for the losses. General, be careful. Just as Ling Xiao moved a box that had been checked to one side, Ning Chen's expression changed and he shouted. Immediately, there was a series of crackling sounds. The entire box of porcelain was revealed from the bottom of the box and fell into the carriage, shattering into pieces. Panic appeared in Ning Chen's eyes as he said anxiously, I forgot to tell the general that the boxes below are quite old. Her Majesty the Empress said in a hurry that she wouldn't check them again once we have the token. It's not a problem. I was anxious and forgot about it. Ling Xiao's expression was also ugly. Although it was not some rare treasure that was broken, it was still something from Weiyang Palace. Moreover, the Empress had said in a hurry. It must be important. Thinking of this, Ling Xiao looked at Zhao Jin with an unkind expression. It was all this damned old eunuch's fault. If it was not for this old fellow being so meddlesome, he would not have made such a big mistake. Below the carriage, Ning Chen sighed softly and said with a bitter face, General, you should check quickly so that I can finish my task quickly and ask for forgiveness from Her Majesty the Empress. Hearing that Ning Chen didn't intend to push all the blame onto him, Ling Zhao's impression of the former instantly improved. Comparing it to Zhao Jin who was watching from the side, there was no need to think about who could be trusted and who couldn't be trusted. Thinking of this, Ling Xiao jumped down from the carriage and said seriously, there's no need to check. Little eunuch, quickly leave the palace. Don't delay Her Majesty the Empress's task. If Her Majesty blames you for breaking things, Ling Xiao will definitely bear the responsibility with little eunuch. Thank you, General. Ning Chen's face showed gratitude, but he felt a little guilty in his heart. This Ling Xiao was so righteous. Was it bad for him to trick him like this? Of course, this feeling of guilt only lasted for a moment before it disappeared without a trace. Buddha said, if I don't go to hell, who will? Unfortunately, he had always believed that if he did not go to hell, others would go to hell. Moreover, a little eunuch ran away from the palace. Even if it was found out, it was not a big mistake. It was still far from going to hell. However, if he was caught, he would really go to hell. On the side, Zhao Jin saw that he did not find out anything. He smiled coldly and left. His arrogant attitude really made people unhappy. Ning Chen thought in his heart and could roughly guess the reason. He and Zhao Jin had only met twice. They did not have any grudges. When they met for the first time, Zhao Jin even wanted to help him. When they met again today, his attitude was completely different. It was obvious that it was because of Zhang Sun. In the palace, there were constant fights, both open and covert. It was important to choose a side. Now, it seemed that Zhao Jin was most likely on the West Palace's side. That was why he showed hostility to him when he came out of Zhangsun Palace. Unfortunately, if he was not in a hurry to leave the palace, he really wanted to stay and teach this old man a lesson. Ning Chen shook his head regretfully. He immediately looked at Ling Xiao and said, General, let's go. Ling Xiao saw that Ning Chen's expression changed. He thought that the latter was worried about being punished when he came back. He did not think that Ning Chen was depressed because he did not have the chance to stab Zhao Jin after leaving the palace today. Perhaps even Ning Chen himself did not notice that in these few days in Weiyang Palace, whether it was his actions or thoughts, intentionally or unintentionally, he judged from Zhang Xuan's point of view. Even if he did not admit it and blamed Zhang Sun for everything, he could not lie about his inner feelings. Ning Qin seemed to live in a carefree and unrestrained manner. However, in his heart, he had never truly let go. The journey out of the palace was quite smooth. With Zhang Sun's token and Ling Zhao's escort, the guards at the palace gate let them go after a brief inspection. No one would have thought that the little eunuch who escorted the empress back to the palace was carrying the assassin who tried to assassinate Emperor Xia and broke into the imperial study at night. After leaving the palace, Ning Qin immediately drove the carriage towards Duan Pharmacy. His face that had been hiding his emotions finally showed anxiety. The carriage moved quickly, bringing up a trail of dust. Nearly 2 hours later, the carriage stopped in front of the pharmacy. Ning Qin carried Mu Qingxue out from a box hidden at the bottom of the carriage. He took 2 steps forward and kicked open the wooden door of the pharmacy. He hurriedly ran towards the inner courtyard. "Shopkeeper, quickly save him." The shopkeeper had already heard such a big commotion in the front courtyard. He walked out and was about to angrily reprimand him when he saw that it was Ning Qin. He suppressed his anger and subconsciously looked at Mu Qingxue in the latter's arms. However, with one look, the shopkeeper's heart also rose. "Quickly enter the room." Seeing that the woman's situation was extremely dangerous, the shopkeeper immediately called Ning Qin back into the room. After putting Mu Qingxue down, he immediately went forward to diagnose him. "Go to the hall and get my silver needles, quickly." The shopkeeper quickly instructed as he checked Mu Qingxue's injuries. "Okay." Ning Qin did not dare to delay and immediately ran to the front hall to find what the shopkeeper needed. A moment later, Ning Qin came back with the silver needles and handed them to the shopkeeper. He then stood to the side and watched nervously. "Don't just stand there. Quickly go and boil some water, the more the better." The shopkeeper took out the silver needles and looked back at Ning Qin. "Okay." Ning Qin nodded and immediately ran out of the room to boil water in the kitchen. A quarter of an hour later, Ning Qin boiled a big pot of water in the kitchen and then came back with a basin of hot water. He saw that the shopkeeper was already treating Mu Qingxue with the needles with a serious expression. After a while, the shopkeeper's forehead was already covered in sweat. His white gown was torn and stuck to his body. He was in a very sorry state. The shopkeeper did not say anything and Ning Qin did not dare to disturb him. He could only stand to the side and wait for orders. About a quarter of an hour later, the shopkeeper stood up tiredly. His body swayed and he almost lost his balance. "Is the water ready?" The shopkeeper steadied himself and asked. "Yes, it's ready." Ning Qin quickly replied. "Help her take off her clothes and bathe," the shopkeeper said tiredly. Me. Ning Qin was stunned and could not stay calm. He pointed at himself and stammered. "If it's not you, then it's me." The shopkeeper threw out a sentence and then naturally walked out of the room. "The water doesn't need to be too hot, just slightly hot. Pay attention to the time. It can't be too short, but it can't be more than 2 hours either." Okay. Ning Qin was already dumbfounded and subconsciously nodded. Chapter 14. In the inner courtyard of Duan Pharmacy, Ning Qin was busy for half a day. He looked at the bathtub filled with hot water and then looked at Mu Qingxue on the bed. Should he take it off or not? "I can't get over my conscience." Ning Qin touched his heart and found that he still felt guilty. This proved that he was not a heartless person. However, there was a reason for this. Could he not care about trifles? Ning Qin tried to convince himself. He reached out his hand but then retracted it. He suddenly remembered that women in this era were quite conservative. Even if there was a reason for him to do this, it did not seem appropriate. "Shopkeeper, you've killed me." Ning Qin complained in his heart. He stared at Mu Qingxue for a while and finally sighed. He made up his mind. "If I don't go to hell, who will?" Ning Chen made up his mind and carefully walked to the bed. He carefully looked at Mu Qingxue and confirmed that she would not wake up anytime soon. Only then did he feel relieved and reached out to take off her clothes. Suddenly, Mu Qingxue softly moaned and her delicate body moved. Ning Chen was so scared that he immediately retracted his hand. This is too scary. Ning Chen's face was gloomy. This great aunt was a ruthless person who even dared to assassinate the Xia emperor. If she woke up and found out something, he would probably have to enter the palace and become a eunuch. With a ripping sound, Ning Chen tore a piece of cloth from his clothes and covered his eyes. He could not help but sigh in his heart. I'm really a gentleman. After covering his eyes, he really could not see anything. Ning Chen sighed and felt a little regretful at the same time. There was a famous saying, "Men, another name for you is beast." Ning Chen did not know if he was considerate, but he was really good at taking off people's clothes. Moreover, Mu Qingshue's clothes were not too hard to take off. He was able to do it quickly and easily. However, whether there was any accidental physical contact during this period of time was purely up to his conscience. Of course, even if there was, he would not admit it. After a while, Ning Chen carefully carried Mu Qingxue into the bathtub. Only then did he remove the cloth from his eyes. Then, he looked at his hands and smiled foolishly. He would not wash his hands for the next 2 days. The rest of the things were much easier. Ning Chen waited beside the bathtub. Every 15 minutes, he would add some hot water into the bathtub. During this time, he just sat there foolishly waiting. Suddenly, in the tub, Mu Qingxue uttered a painful groan. Following this, he spat out a mouthful of blood, which dyed the water in front of him red. Mu Qingxue. Ning Chen rushed forward but was stopped by Mu Qingxue, who was still half awake. No! Mu Qingxue let out a long groan that was even more painful than before. Water splashed all over his body. His long hair fluttered, and the Jin Qi in his body spread out. Instantly, the tables and chairs around him were sent flying, and broken wood scattered everywhere. Even Ning Chen, who was not far from him, was sent flying. With a bang, Ning Chen crashed into the wall and fell to the ground. Soon after, he vomited a mouthful of blood. It was obvious that he had suffered serious internal injuries. Truly, if you don't seek death, you won't die. Ning Chen struggled to get up. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and hurried to check on Mu Qingshue's condition. In his half-conscious state, Mu Qingxue glanced at Ning Chen, but before he could say anything, he fainted once again. Ning Chen was shocked. He stretched out his hand to feel the pulse on the former's neck. When he found that the latter's heartbeat was still there, he immediately let out a sigh of relief. After taking a closer look, Ning Chen found that Mu Qingshue's complexion was much better than before. This damned shopkeeper, why didn't he tell me earlier? It hurts so much. Seeing that Mu Qingxue was fine, Ning Chen finally recovered. His whole body was in so much pain that he gritted his teeth. It had only been a few days, but the amount of blood he had lost and vomited was almost equal to the amount he had lost in his previous life. If this continued, he would bleed to death before Zhang Sun caught him and chopped him up. Although he was mumbling, Ning Chen still covered his eyes again and pulled Mu Qingxue out of the water. After wiping his body dry, he carried Mu Qingxue back to the bed and covered him with a blanket. Only then did he untie the blindfold. Looking at the undulating curves of the blanket, Ning Chen sighed. When he first met her, he had guessed correctly. How could a woman be so flat? Drip! At this moment, Ning Chen suddenly felt his nose warm. Drops of blood flowed out and slid down his clothes to his chest. It was very dazzling. Ning Chen's face turned red. After thinking for a moment, he felt that he should go to the shopkeeper. He felt that he couldn't be so useless. He must have suffered internal injuries. After a while in the shopkeeper's room, Ning Chen nervously looked at the shopkeeper who was checking his pulse. He was afraid that the latter would say something like his internal organs were injured and there was no cure. It's nothing serious. Just take 2 sets of medicine. The shopkeeper calmly withdrew his hand and said. Phew, Ning Chen secretly sighed in relief. Fortunately, he remembered that he had a nosebleed for no reason. He still worriedly asked, "Are you really okay?" "I also had a nosebleed just now." Hearing this, the shopkeeper calmly glanced at Ning Chen and said, "It's normal for young people to have excessive liver heat. If you care, I can give you another set of medicine to reduce liver heat." Cough cough, it's different. No need. Ning Chen was embarrassed. He hurriedly coughed to cover it up and refused. "Brother Ning, didn't you already go back to the palace with the empress?" "Why?" The shopkeeper paused. He didn't know if he could say this. After all, it was a matter of the palace. He couldn't ask too much. Hee hee. Ning Chen smiled awkwardly. He didn't want to lie, but he couldn't tell the truth either. He could only smile foolishly. Seeing that Ning Chen was in a difficult position, the shopkeeper didn't force him. He said straightforwardly, "Since Brother Ning doesn't want to say more, I won't force you. Brother Ning, you can rest assured and stay here for the next few days. It won't be too late to leave after that girl's injuries get better." "Thank you, shopkeeper." Ning Chen gratefully cupped his hands and thanked him. Although he said that, he still had to think about where to go in the future. After all, this wasn't a long-term plan. Zhang Sun was so smart. If she thought of this, he would be dead. He couldn't guarantee that Zhang Sun would let him go. Leaving the palace without permission was no joke. Moreover, he came out in the name of Zhang Sun. It could be said that if he was caught, his life would depend on Zhang Sun's mood. Although Zhang Sun was famous for being a virtuous empress, to be able to stand firm in the Xia palace with all the scheming, it would be stupid to believe that Zhang Sun was a soft-hearted person. Ning Chen scratched his head and walked to his room. He didn't have money. This was the biggest problem now. In order to leave the palace today, he didn't dare to bring anything valuable except for Zhang Sun's jade pendant. However, he didn't dare to sell it even if he was beaten to death. Opening the door with a creak, Ning Chen walked to the bedside and took a stool to sit down. He stared blankly at Mu Qingxue on the bed. This ancestor woke up and was most likely going to leave. Should he sacrifice his face and beg her to take him with her? Ah! Thinking of this, Ning Chen couldn't help but be stunned. He suddenly realized that he didn't know anything about Mu Qingxue except for her name. He didn't even know if her name was real or fake. Ning Chen instantly felt that he was a fool. For the sake of a woman of unknown origin, he had almost lost his life. Moreover, whether or not he would be able to keep his life in the future was another matter. "I've been obsessed." Ning Chen sighed softly. As expected, men shouldn't make promises too easily. People could really die. Ning Chen spent half the night thinking about random things. Unknowingly, he leaned against the bed and fell asleep. Master Zhang went to the front hall early in the morning and didn't come to disturb him. Ning Chen only woke up in a daze when the morning sun was a little dazzling. When he opened his eyes, he saw a pair of bright eyes staring at him. He didn't react and raised his hand to greet, "Morning." Before he finished his words, Ning Chen stood up with a swoosh. His back was sweating like rain. He unconsciously took 2 steps back and laughed dryly, You're awake." Mu Qingxue's expression didn't change. She nodded and said calmly, "Can you leave for a moment? I want to change my clothes." Of course, Ning Chen turned around and left. He was nervous. Although he was trying to save someone, he still didn't do it properly. This era was too harsh on women. What he did was to destroy someone's innocence. Mu Qingxue's calmness made him feel a little uneasy. Maybe he was thinking too much. He had only been in this world for a few days, but he had experienced a lot. Thinking about it carefully, he still felt like he was in a dream. It was too unreal. This kind of unreal feeling made him feel like he was just in a dream. He was afraid that when his mirror's image was shattered, no one would remember his existence. The door opened and Mu Qingxue walked out. Her face was a little pale, but it couldn't hide her moving beauty. "Thank you." Mu Qingxue said it calmly, but it made Ning Chen's heart feel heavy. In the silent atmosphere, the two didn't know what to say. They both had their own thoughts and couldn't speak. "I'm leaving." After a long time, Mu Qingxue softly said. "So fast?" Ning Chen was startled. He raised his head and looked at the former's beautiful face. "I've been out for a long time. It's time to go back." Mu Qingxue looked deeply at Ning Chen, but her tone was firm. "Today?" Ning Chen felt an indescribable irritation. He couldn't suppress it, as if he was about to lose something very important. "Yes." Mu Qingxue nodded. His expression and tone were as calm as usual, and no one could see the slightest ripple in his expression. "Ah, then I wish you a safe journey. If fate wills it, we'll meet again." Ning Chen smiled and pretended to be at ease. Mu Qingxue sighed in her heart. She also wanted to say, "If fate wills it, we'll meet again." She opened her mouth, but in the end, she couldn't say it. She flipped her hand and a golden piece of paper appeared. She immediately handed it to Ning Chen and said, "This is for you. Don't let anyone know about it." "What is it for?" Ning Chen took the paper and looked at the small words on it. He curiously asked. "Mental cultivation." Mu Qingxue softly said. "Is it for strengthening the body?" Ning Chen smiled as he thought of their conversation that night. "Yes." Mu Qingxue's beautiful face also revealed a smile as she nodded. "Remember to take care of yourself. Don't do anything stupid." Ning Chen couldn't be at ease as they were about to leave. "Yes." Mu Qingxue obediently nodded. Her expression also softened. "Since we're about to leave, let's hug." Ning Chen didn't want the atmosphere to be too heavy. He stretched out his arms and joked. Mu Qingxue was slightly startled, but she didn't avoid it. She let Ning Chen hug her. "You must be good." Feeling the soft and fragrant body in his arms, Ning Chen's arms unconsciously tightened, as if he wanted to keep this feeling in his heart forever. Mu Qingxue still left. The last bit of warmth in his arms disappeared along with the gentle breeze. Ning Chen's heart ached, so much so that he couldn't speak. The golden piece of paper in his hand still had some bloodstains. Ning Chen wasn't stupid. He naturally knew where this mental cultivation method came from. For an unintentional joke, Mu Qingxue risked her life to break into Emperor Xia's imperial study at night. She was really stupid. Until the end, he still didn't know anything about her. It was as if the two of them had met by chance. They had no choice but to know each other and believe each other. Ah. Ning Chen's suppressed emotions fluctuated, bringing out a touch of vermilion. His legs wobbled and he almost couldn't stand still. Sigh. Not far away, the shopkeeper sighed softly. He didn't go forward, but left the sad person alone to lick his wounds. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.